Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Tilted Lawyer podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing Chad Daybell's trial. And if you recall, Chad Daybell is the husband of Lori Vallow, who's already been convicted for the murder of her children. This trial implicates him and his involvement in the murders. He's facing the death penalty. There's a lot going on. You're going to want to stick around. We're going to get to all of it coming up next. Let's get started. Whatever you might be going through and wherever you might be, this is Omar Serrato with the Tilted Lawyer podcast. I'm here to take your mind off of things. Yes, I'm an attorney. No, I'm not giving you legal advice. We're going to sit and talk like people, as these are the candid thoughts of one practicing attorney, and it's after hours. So have a seat. Feel free to have a drink and join me. Let's get started. Here we go. So Chad Daybell is currently in day 2 of trial for his murder case where he's facing the death penalty. And if you recall, I don't remember when it was, maybe 6 or 7 months ago, we covered in depth the story and the timeline of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. And if you recall, Chad Daybell was this doomsday prophesier, as you will. And he
writer.
He had his own publishing company, which is essentially him. I think his wife was involved maybe for a short period of time, but he wrote these religious books and espoused these religious ideologies that identified good and evil, light and dark, and Lori Vallow was eating all of it up. There was a trial for the Lori Vallow case. She was found guilty on all counts, and not to mention she's facing murder charges in different states for the murder of her ex-husband, various other things. So Lori Vallow's not exactly done, but she's already been convicted. She's doing life in prison. I don't remember, but she did not get the death penalty, did she? I don't remember what we said. Yeah, but she's not going anywhere is the point. Chad Daybell is facing the death penalty. And he, currently in day 2 of trial, before we even started this trial, his attorney tried to get himself thrown off of the case. Now, Eliana, Miss Super Lawyer, I have to ask you the question because this is kind of the basis of Mr. Daybell's attorney, why he wanted off the case. He doesn't feel that he's competent enough to be able to represent somebody in the death penalty case, which is kind of what he said. How often do you go into cases feeling as if you are inadequate as an attorney for all of your cases or any of your cases? Or maybe you don't. Maybe you just got it down packed and you're ready to do this.
No, I mean, it happens often, and I think it's normal, or at least that's what I was told by one of my law school professors, because it humbles you and it makes you realize that the other party might have some strong arguments, and it also makes you, I guess, question your position and seek what the other party may argue against, and you need to prepare for that. But I mean, from what I remember from the ethical rules, if you feel like you're not competent, you need to make yourself competent.
Yeah, but the thing with this motion is his attorney basically drafted the motion, and this is what he argued. John Pryor, is the attorney, has represented Mr. Daybell since he was arrested on murder charges in 2021, along with his wife, Lori Vallow, filed the motion last week saying his client can't afford to pay him, for one. That's the grain motion that we talk about, and that he is not qualified to defend somebody in a death penalty case. The problem with this motion is that he brought it in 2024. He's been representing him for 3 years.
I was going to say that, it's a little bit too last minute, and I think it places, the defendant in a position where his rights could be violated, or compared to him just becoming competent. I mean, how much is going to take him to do a little bit more research, and how much does it change the strategy of the case if the death penalty is one of the options?
Imagine that you are the defendant in a death penalty case and your lawyer says, Your Honor, I can't do this. I don't have the experience and he's not paying me anyway. And that's the other thing. He's not paying him. What does it have to do with your competence? So it's basically a 2-pronged motion. Take a moment to consider our show sponsor, Aura. internet security. If you have been following my Instagram or my Facebook, you would know that we have been attacked by hackers, and both of those accounts have been deleted, ripped off of the face of the earth. It happens. Hacking is a real thing that occurs. And let me tell you something else. Data brokers will sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. And you might not believe it, but your full name, your email address, your home address, your health records, your relatives, your children, your spouse, all of it is out there. I am a lawyer. I do my own background checks. I pay good money for my background checks, but it's starting to get to the point where you could Google anybody's name and some kind of a secondary source of information, such as a birth date or email address or something, and you will find that you can Google all of this information. It's just out there for people to exploit. That's why I have decided to use Aura, the sponsor of today's video. On Aura they show me specifically which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. And I'll tell you what, I had them when I signed up for their services. They showed me there was 3 separate internet brokers that were selling my information that they automatically got rid of for me by taking the initiative to opt out of those memberships. So cleaning up my information, cleaning up your information, and not only reduces the amount of spam that I get, it protects me from hackers that could use my information to help them access my social media accounts. Highlight, if you've been a follower of my Instagram or my TikTok, or well, not my TikTok, but my Facebook, you will know that those accounts no longer exist. It had nothing to do with anything. I had a 20-year-old Facebook account. It's completely gone because of hackers, spammers, whatever you want to call it. It's gone. So it protects me from that. It protects your social media accounts, your bank accounts, other sensitive information. Also, Aura does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. I get other features like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more without having to download several different apps. It's really easy to set it up. I did it, matter of fact, this morning. It took me about a couple of minutes to get me all set up and protected. And you get it all at a really easy, affordable price. But beside that, you might already have some of these tools already, but not having Aura is literally like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. People just walk right in and take all of your stuff. I value my privacy. I value yours. You can go right now to aura.com/tiltedlawyer. To start your 2-week free trial, no cost to you. It's going to be linked below in the description. Go in and sign up for your free 14-day trial and experience all of the protection that comes with Aura Internet Security. It's powered by artificial intelligence. You're not going to regret it. Go on in and check them out.
Yeah, I think that was like, well, if this one doesn't work, maybe this other one might.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I understand the stress of defending people in a jury trial for a criminal case because their freedom is on the line. And that level of stress is nothing to be sneezed at. It is enormous. It takes over your entire being, your entire essence. I can remember my very first jury trial, and I was literally, there was no sleep. It was like a 5-day trial. Yeah. Every minute of the day was devoted towards thinking of that trial. When we went on recess, for lunch, there was no lunch. You're in your notes, you're preparing.
No, you're doing notes and trying to maybe get a bite, but at the same time.
Afterwards, you're like trying to rehearse your direct exams, cross exams, closing arguments. Back then I was using PowerPoint presentations, but going over them and rehearsing like in the mirror and like trying to.
Oh my.
And then I remember thinking, I'm going to relax and I'm going to watch TV or something. And then thinking, how dare you sit here and rest when your client's freedom is on the line? Who are you to have a rest? And so
that's a lot.
Even if that's not logical to think because you need to rest, because you need those are real thoughts. And so I appreciate the gravity of it. The problem is if you're going to bring emotion like that, you do it in 21 or you just don't take the case.
Exactly. I was going to say that if you are not prepared to do that, then maybe you shouldn't be taking the case in the beginning, or maybe you shouldn't be doing these type of criminal cases because there every now and then one with a death penalty is going to come up.
Yeah, and to answer your question, there's not really a whole lot additional you need to learn about death penalty cases. There's just there's a couple more procedural things that you have to do, but you could Google it. I mean,
Exactly.
Alexis, you'll figure that out pretty quickly. The mechanics of trial, the law doesn't change.
Exactly.
We're arguing guilt or innocence, and and what the judge basically told him was to pound sand. I'll finish the article. This is from the Independent. It'll be linked down below when Dominic uploads the video. But so during the hearing at the Fremont County Courtroom on Thursday, Mr. Pryor repeatedly told Judge Stephen Boyce, who was the trial attorney or the trial judge, that he didn't need to get paid, but that he would like to be paid. He also claimed he hasn't been able to find additional attorneys to help, which has left him without enough time to effectively prepare for the trial slated to begin on April 1st. He says, I don't desire to get off this case. I want to stay on this case. And regardless of Mr. Daybell's financial situation, I want to stay on the case. He said, I could care less about this money. Mr. Daybell wants me to stay on this case, but I still want to get paid. He's like going back and forth.
Yeah, it's like...
He's like, I don't know. He's not coming off very well. I think he kind of probably knew he was going to lose this motion. I don't know.
Now I wonder how this is going to affect if he is found guilty. If then Chad is going to be like, well, he didn't represent me competently because in the beginning he said he wasn't competent. So,
but everybody makes that claim. My lawyer was ineffective. And this judge specifically made a finding that, well, you haven't demonstrated an effectiveness to me in the 3 years that I've seen you on this case. And so he's kind of already rejected that. I'm really not that worried about it because the level of professional malfeasance you have to conduct to actually be found ineffective as counsel is so high. They don't question whether or not you should have done this or should have done that. It's whether or not it was so egregious that no reasonable attorney would have done that, which is basically the negligence standard anyway. And so I don't think that it's going to affect appeals or anything. But yet, you're right. It's one of the first things that I thought about. Mr. Pryor said he's been trying to find death penalty qualified attorneys, but in Idaho, there is a shortage of such attorneys. He explained that in order for Mr. Daybell to have the trial he deserves with the qualified attorneys, he would need to step aside so that the court would appoint 2 such public defenders. He says, if the court denies my motion, I am prepared to go forward and push this case to the end regardless, and I'm committed to that. Do I think it's fair I don't get paid? No. Do I want to get paid? I absolutely want to get paid for the work that I do. He sounds like a weasel. I will not want this guy representing me, even as get out of here, guy. I might go Daryl Brooks.
He's private counsel for him, right?
Private counsel, yeah. He took on the case. He's saying he's not getting paid or whatever. He's like, hey, you should have withdrew a long time ago, man. Yeah. State prosecutors opposed the motion, with prosecutor Lindsay Blake arguing that the request to withdraw from the case appears to be an attempt to delay the proceedings, and it would have delayed the proceedings, like probably by a good year or 2. You're bringing in new counsel to a death penalty case with the years of discovery that have already happened. You're talking about over a year delay, probably. We're not going to see this trial until maybe 26. And so the judge said, nah, we're not doing that. Mr. Blake or Miss Blake added that Mr. Daybell waived his rights to a capital qualified lawyer and that the alleged cult leader's money issues were known a year ago, yet Mr. Pryor continued to represent Daybell, which is true. And I also feel that any competent attorney would have extricated themselves from this case a long time ago, knowing all of that. Oh, I'm not getting paid. Well, then I'm gone. Good luck to you, Mr. Daybell. But he persisted for whatever reason. I don't know. But so before making his ruling, Judge Boyce pointed out that Mr. Pryor has been on Mr. Daybell's case for a long time. And if the motion was granted and new representation was brought in, the trial could be pushed out a year or longer, affecting a number of people. At some point, the court has to consider the timing here. That's the big issue with this motion. The motion, if granted, would absolutely require a continuance of the trial and not just a brief continuance. I don't have any idea who would be appointed, but what I do know, the trial would have to be vacated and continued, and I think that likely for a long time, maybe a year, maybe even more. And with that, he made his ruling and just basically denied the motion. He says, I don't find anything in the record that Mr. Pryor has been ineffective in assistance in Mr. Daybell's case. And there's a difference between ineffective and, well, maybe he just made some bad decisions like it looks like he's probably done in this case.
Yeah. I mean, at least what I remember is like, if you need to withdraw from a case, just do it as far away from the trial as you can, because the closer you get to trial,
Yeah.
the harder it is.
You can't put your client, ethically, you cannot put your client in a position where they're scrambling before trial. That's not fair. And as an attorney, you doing that is an act of cowardice, really. You were in it this long. You knew these issues about, like the prosecutor said over a year ago, and yet here we are. So what do you want? What a missed opportunity for him. He has the opportunity to defend Mr. Daybell in this high-profile trial and make a career of it. Oh, I have this death penalty case, high-profile cases, and I've represented Mr. Daybell, whatever, regardless of what the outcome is. The fact that he's representing himself as an attorney this way, I can't imagine is all that good for his business.
That marketing strategy, I don't think it's the best.
Yeah, and so Kay Woodcock, J.J. Vallow's grandmother, posted about the judge's decision that she was really happy about it. Yes, no trial delay. Our Lord is guiding this. He wants Chad in prison where he belongs. So we proceeded. And do you remember the crux of Lori Vallow's defense in her case? It wasn't a very good one. But she, if you recall, was very careful not to throw Chad under the bus, which was bizarre to me. Like, there was nothing like, oh, Chad tricked me and he brainwashed me and this was all his fault. None of that really came out. She was basically silent on the issue, even to the point where even after they were arrested, she was very desirous to maintain a relationship with Chad until he ended up getting arrested. There's phone calls between the two of them while they were in prison. And what do you think Chad's strategy is going to be in his defense, in the defense of his case?
Maybe throw Vallow under the bus. She's already in jail.
100%. He's turning all the way over. He's throwing her under all of the buses.
Yeah,
whatever he could find. Yeah, he's not going to be delicate in how he represents. So the trial is underway. I always do this with you for all of our cases. Okay, so Chad Daybell comes to your office. He wants representation, and you know about him what we know about him. And just to rehash, Chad Daybell is this doomsday prophet that wrote books. Lori Vallow was very infatuated with him. They ended up falling in love. They were both married at the time. His wife mysteriously dies shortly thereafter, and like a month later, they're in Hawaii. And we'll revisit the timeline after I get through these recaps. But basically, the case is, it looks like your client, prospective client, is responsible for the planning and evisceration of 2 children, one of which was severely autistic. When I say severely, just meaning he had issues communicating and things like that. And it looks like the way that the evidence is going to be presented and the way that it came out, that it may have been because of what he knew or was being prevented from saying. What do you advise Chad Daybell about his chances?
About his chances?
Of getting out of this? What is your strategy for him?
Well, the strategy will be just to throw Vallow under the bus. It was her idea. I don't know. He didn't know the details of what was going on. What else? I mean, I don't remember much about his involvement, though.
Well, his involvement, if you recall, because the way that's all been framed was all Lori's doing.
Yes.
But a lot of that is just because she had her trial first.
Because, I remember him, being the person that Lori will follow with all the craziness on the books and the demons and...
Exactly. The demons.
Yes.
And so here's the thing. So Lori very much subscribed to his theories of religion. She very much thought that she was a chosen person. She thought that Chad was like this spirit guide or whatever, however she termed it, and that he had these ways or methods of knowing what was good and evil. And there was like a formula. There was levels to it.
Yes, the levels to light, and I don't know.
Yeah, he determined that the children were like level 1 or 2 vampires or demons or something that he said. She was eating that up 100%. His responsibility was either that, and again, we really don't know. Here's what we don't know, and what we still don't know after the Vallow trial. We don't know who committed the murders. We don't know how the murders were committed. I remember saying that It's possible, because this is sort of a circumstantial case, other than they found the bodies on Daybell's property, that because we don't know who committed the murders, they may not be found guilty of murder. Because I think there was some speculation that it was Lori's brother.
Yes.
You recall. And so his involvement is either as a conspirator or as the person that committed the murders himself. So my defense for him would essentially be that, look, she was your girlfriend. She was like this lady who you thought was really attractive, and you were getting divorced. You were going through like a midlife crisis or whatever, and she was filling a void. But the closer you guys got after being married, you realized that she was actually crazy. And then you found out, or came home one day, that she killed the children, and you panicked and freaked out and didn't know what to do. And you know, but it was all her idea, and she did everything. I had nothing to do with this. I never wanted any children to be. I love those kids. He'd say something like that. I'd imagine that'd be probably his best course, his best shot, because the evidence against him is overwhelming. There's text messages.
Yes.
There's video evidence. There's photographs. They found the kids in his house, in his yard. He was basically trying to flee when he knew that the FBI was digging up his yard. That he tried to do a Scott Peterson. He didn't get very far because they weren't letting him within like a mile of that house. And then he got arrested and the whole thing. So here's what he's facing: 3 counts of first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell, his wife, J.J. Vallow, of course, and Tylee Ryan. 3 counts of conspiracy to commit murder: Tammy, J.J., and Tylee. So interestingly, conspiracy and the actual murders themselves, those 6 counts are basically equivalent. So if you didn't have the murder charges, you'd still have the conspiracy counts, and it carries with it the same weight. I think the difference is, I'm not sure if the death penalty attaches to conspiracy the same way in this case, which is the reason why they are charging him with both. And because of that, it's a death penalty case. They got him for insurance fraud and grand theft, which are, not obviously all that significant in light of everything. So they sat the jury. They began on Wednesday. The judge, interestingly, I'm getting these updates from East Idaho News, and again, there will be links. But the jurors were sworn in. And by the way, if you ever wondered what the juries get for sitting for a trial like this, the jurors get $10 a day, in this case anyway, and after 5 days, it bumps up to about $40 a day. And there have been indications from the prosecution that this is going to be a lengthy trial. I think Lori's trial took like 2 or 3 weeks. I'd imagine this is going to take something similar. So, $40, what's that get you? That gets you, that feeds a family of 2 at McDonald's nowadays.
Yes. I mean, just get yourself
But they're reimbursed for mileage. That's something, right? And then they're fed lunch and snacks while they're there. Cafeteria food.
If it is somebody that is living paycheck to paycheck and they're having to go through this trial as a juror,
it's going to be difficult.
It's going to be difficult. My suggestion is find a job that pays you.
Yeah, I think a lot of jobs offer something like that,
most,
but not all. Yeah. But then they're very careful in jury selection if there's an issue like that where they're not going to let somebody become destitute on account of becoming a juror. And so, jury instructions, and then the prosecution begins with their presentation. Attorney Wood asks for a hand mic and stands in front of the jury. I've never stood in front of a jury with a hand mic like you're holding it. I wonder if that's what they mean by hand mic. And they're doing the PowerPoint presentation. So it's an outdated opening statement. And this is her line: 2 dead children found buried in Chad Daybell's backyard. He says Tammy Daybell was found dead in her bed, and 17 days later, he married his mistress on the beaches of Hawaii. You remember those pictures?
Yes.
His desire for sex, money, and power led to the deaths of his wife and 2 innocent children. She said that he craves significance, referring to Daybell. He says that Daybell was an author and explains the background of Chad and Tammy. They had 5 children. They moved to Idaho, where Tammy became a beloved school librarian. For this defendant, that ordinary existence was not enough. And yeah, he had like a hole, like his wife. like seemed like an awesome lady. Like she was just like, I don't know, healthy, vibrant librarian, looked like a social butterfly. And then, you know, she's supporting this effing guy.
I know.
In his pursuits to become this religious author, I guess. And I remember that vaguely that she was supporting him in some of that, and financially even. And then he meets Lori and says, oh, and then he murders her, basically, is their deal. She says that you're going to hear about a pivotal date, the day that Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow met at a religious conference in St. George, Utah. That introduction set into motion what you will hear about. She says, in his thirst for sex, power, and money, Chad created an alternate reality where he called themselves James and Alina. Wood says he was captivated by Lori's presence and spoke about their sexual encounters on many occasions. Do you remember those text messages that we read back and forth? They were so bad. Oh, gross. More than anything else, Chad's obsession with Lori was rooted in her adoration for him. He called her an exalted goddess. I'm getting like third-party cringe right now. Just remembering what we talked about last time. Wood laid out in his statements with chapters that Wood said that anybody who opposed Chad and Lori were labeled as dark spirits or even zombies. Remember that?
Yes.
Anybody that got upset with them or challenged them, their sisters, aunts, uncles, whatever, the kids, well, they're just a demon or they're zombies. And the evidence will show that this was a convenient narrative to dehumanize people who stood in their way. This narrative gave them the pretext to remove people from the world for good. Wood introduces Alex Cox, and 2 pictures of him appear on the screen. Wood references the blessing Chad gave to Alex. Wood says, text messages will be shown showing Alex told his wife that he was afraid he was going to be Chad and Lori's fall guy. Remember the brother?
Yes.
And he was the fall guy, and he was mysteriously died a short time after the death of Lori's ex-husband. Remember?
Yes.
The jurors were told that Charles Vallow was shot and killed by Alex in Arizona. Lori stood to get $1 million and awaited it, only to learn that she was no longer the beneficiary on the insurance claim. She says in a text message, I'll still get the $4,000 a month from Social Security. And then Chad responded, it'll be interesting to see if it got changed after he had 2 bullets in his chest. So they're going back and forth. They're getting into the fraud aspect of this. Woods shows images of Tylee, JJ, their bodies deceased, autopsy photos. The trial was live, and I heard that the live feed showed some of the images, but it was too far away to depict anything. But they were showing these images in court. The jurors were in the front row to see all of these. He explains that Daybell said Tylee and JJ were possessed. They were found in Chad's backyard. Tammy Daybell, a vivacious, happy mother, was another individual labeled as a dark spirit to be removed. I wonder if she even knew who Lori Vallow was, or if she was aware that they were having an affair at that point, but she's a dark spirit because...
I don't know how involved. I don't think it was ever mentioned, or at least I haven't read about how involved she was with her husband's whole.
Well, she wasn't very. I mean, she supported it financially, but her involvement was basically none. It was hey, do your thing.
I mean, in these communities also, a lot of people, they know everybody. So she might have known who she was, but maybe not that she was having an affair with her husband.
So they go in about the Tammy's death and Chad cashing in on her life insurance policy. Chad and Lori then went to Hawaii, rented a condo. You're going to hear from multiple witnesses that Chad predicted multiple times that Tammy would die or early death. And do you remember how we said last time that Tammy was outside and she heard she got shot with paintballs or something like that. And it was the strangest thing. And it was our opinion that we thought that was a failed assassination attempt. And he's over here predicting her death. And then they're in Hawaii and they're doing all of these things. They're collecting from the insurance. They're really dead to rights on the insurance fraud stuff. It just doesn't look good. Wood shows photos of Chad and Lori on the beach. He says they were preparing for their wedding well before Tammy's death. Dominic will flash some of those pictures of them on the beach, just these cringe. Oh, I gotta say, man, I know it's not very professional to say, but Chad Daybell just looks like this big dork. He's got like, the double chin thing going. He's got like, but he's like happy as can be. And I remember thinking that, oh, it looks like one of those pictures that you would put like as the stock photo in like frames that you would buy at Target. But knowing the context, it was literally days after the murder of the children, and they're dressed all in white, and they have like this wreath or whatever it was. What do you call those? The lays?
Yes, the lays.
Yeah, and they have like this sickening smiles. Do you remember when they were confronted? They're like somebody had confronted them while they were on vacation. They're like lounging near a pool, basically sunbathing, and then they're asking, "Where is your children?" Everybody seems to be looking for the children except for you guys. How could you guys sit here and lay in the sun? And then they like start following them out, and the media was hounding them until obviously inevitably their arrest. So Wood shows a slide that says the collapse of the dream. It lists the attempted murder of Brandon Boudreaux, concern for the missing children, lies to police, unwillingness to produce the children, raccoon text. Wood explains the trial will be lengthy. There will be a lot of witnesses. He shows a timeline of major events on the screen. We'll go over some of those timeline events. It shows when Chad and Lori met. Charles Vallow killed. Lori moves to Rexburg. Tylee last seen. The raccoon text. JJ was last seen. Attempted homicide of Brandon Boudreaux. The shooting at Tammy's death. Chad and Lori's marriage. The welfare check on JJ. Chad and Lori lies to the police and leave town. The children are found buried on Chad's property. They're going over all of that. The next slide basically says that they're going to prove through financial evidence, law enforcement testimony, the unraveling of a conspiracy. There's going to be DNA. There's going to be fingerprints. They're going to speak to Hawaii police. So they're basically just going to corroborate the timeline with all this stuff. There's not... I'm curious what the DNA evidence is going to be with respect to them. I guess we'll find out. Wood says that you will hear many of this defendant's own words. You will read multiple texts that he and Lori sent back and forth. A new slide says yet unwritten and lists all the charges Daybell faces. And then we've already gone through those. And then they conclude. Pryor, the clown attorney, they try to get himself kicked off with his opening statement. So let's see what his defense
strategy
theory of the case is going to be. So he, again, with the handheld mic, he says, what's important are facts and evidence. He tells jurors not to be distracted by speculation, guesses, assumptions, or hunches. Pryor says Chad Daybell went on a mission to talk to people about his religious beliefs. Pryor says that Chad served his mission in New Jersey, returned home, and he then dated Tammy for 6 months. They got married, had 5 children, moved to Idaho, ran a publishing company that was predominantly run by Tammy. Pryor tells jury that Chad wrote books about religious experiences. He writes about his premonitions. He writes about good and evil, what it means to be good and what it means to be evil. He writes about dark and light. He writes about death and the coming of the end of things and when his Savior in his mind is going to come back. Pryor says that all of these books were based on fiction, which is interesting that he would go with that because he seemed to be talking about it as if they were real things in his text message. Pryor says in late October of 2018, Chad was invited to speak at an event, and while he was trying to sell his books, this beautifully stunning woman named Lori Vallow comes up and she starts giving him a lot of attention. She pursued him. She encouraged him. She went so far as to go behind the booth and help him in selling his books. Pryor says after the seminar, there was a 1 to 2 month break where Chad and Lori had no contact. Pryor says Chad had a speeding ticket in 2005, but no other background. But Lori Vallow was different. Here's where they start throwing her under the bus. Lori was someone who, right out of high school, married her first husband. That marriage was very short-lived. Very short-lived. He emphasized the very. Pryor mentions Lori's second short-lived married. He says Alex Cox, her brother, would do anything to assist his sister without question. If Alex Cox perceived there was a problem, Alex Cox reacted. Pryor says jury will hear testimony that Lori's third marriage to Joseph Ryan was tumultuous. Pryor says that Alex approached Joseph Ryan and shot him with a taser in 2007, years before Lori knew Chad. It set the pattern for what we are dealing with Alex Cox. Whenever there was a problem with Lori, Alex ran to the rescue. Pryor says Chad and Lori had an inappropriate relationship while their former spouses were still alive. Pryor tells the jury that Alex Cox shot and killed Charles and says that the jury will see that Chad Daybell had nothing to do with the execution of Charles or the shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. I guess the counter to that is it looked an awful lot like a conspiracy because both of their spouses died around the same time. Yeah. Similarly, they were both trying to collect from the insurance, but I understand what he's trying to do. It's all Alex's fault. He's the fall guy, as he predicted shortly before his death. Pryor says that Chad had no background with Miss Texas, Lori Vallow. A very sexual person came into his life, and after that, eventually, yes, there was a murder and there was a burial, Pryor says. He says the backyard of Chad's property is a 4.5-acre farm. Pryor plans to bring forward 4 experts, including Dr. Greg Hampikian, a DNA expert. Hampikian got Amanda Knox exonerated in Italy because of DNA evidence. He is the guy. He's going to talk a little bit about the DNA evidence and what was found on the scene. Pryor says that he will talk about several hairs found on the plastic of J.J. Vallow. He's also going to say there was no DNA evidence, no hair sample of Chad on Tylee or on J.J. Pryor says the jury will also hear from Dr. Raven, a forensic pathologist, who will talk about the circumstances surrounding Tammy Daybell. He says she will say there is no indication that this was a homicide or any other cause of death. But you give me a break. The children were buried in the backyard, dipshit. Like how are they gonna? I don't know. I don't understand where they're going with their theory of the case. So since Chad's DNA wasn't on them, then definitely he's not involved. Never mind that they were found buried in the backyard like they would bury their raccoons or their animals on his 4.5-acre piece of property. But this is what he's saying. Pryor tells the jury to listen to the arguments and not make their decision until the very end. I'm going to ask you folks to return a verdict of not guilty. Thank you, folks. Pryor opening statement was around 19 minutes. Eek. Yikes. Yikes. Boise was now holding a sidebar with attorneys to discuss scheduling. They called the first witness to the stand, the Rexburg Police Department, Ray Hermosillo. And they brought him in. He indicated that his experience, 18 years in law enforcement, they go over his credentials. He says that he contacted Gilbert, Arizona police, and they asked him to seize the Jeep if it could be found. He talks that he says Chad and Lori were observed a few times at the location. His primary job was to look for a Jeep, would ask to admit an exhibit for Hermosillo. So they're going through all of this stuff. And I will not bore you because I'm trying to condense this down to an hour and a half. And this was like hours of testimony. They concluded that day. And then today they had more evidence. So let's talk about some of the highlights from the case. Here's what we knew. Remember before I get to that, what do you think about the presentation of the two? Prosecution, what would you grade them? And I didn't verbatim give the opening statements. It was basically just the highlights of the opening statement, but their approach. What do you think about how they're approaching it?
I mean, I'm not like completely convinced. I'm like, whoa, but at the same time, it's not horrible.
Yeah, I mean, the prosecution is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
This is the timeline. This is what we know. This is what the evidence is going to show. And they have the much harder job. They're going to have to try. They're trying to tie in the insurance fraud to the religious relationship, to the affairs, the timing of everything. The timeline with them is everything. It's the entire case. The only thing presented, and it doesn't look like the defense is going to be denying much. The timeline, yeah, all of those things happened. It just wasn't Chad's fault. That's all it is. Lori's been a monster for many, many years, and he was influenced because she was this sexual person, and he wasn't used to that kind of attention. And so he lost his mind, but it doesn't make him a murderer. They will not find any DNA on any of the bodies. You're not even going to hear evidence to conclude that it was death by homicide, which we'll see with that. I'm pretty sure they're clear on that. But here's the timeline. The timeline in this case is going to be everything, because let's just assume, I'm going to give his defense attorney a little bit of credit and just assume that they are not going to find Chad's DNA on the bodies.
Okay.
That's never been dispositive of anybody being tied to a murder. The methods of murder, the spot where he was buried, the text messages behind that were going back and forth between the two of them is going to be key. So let's start back in 1990. Let's go all the way back.
Oh my.
So let's talk about Chad a little bit. He married his first wife in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Utah. And the couple later started an independent publishing company. It's called Spring Creek Book Company in 2004. He wrote over 25 of these doomsday prep books under the company for Mormon audiences, including fantasies of a dystopian world brought by bioterrorism, attacks, and catastrophic natural disasters. Here's what I know about people that subscribe to that kind of stuff. It is literally a mental illness for people to have these fantastical conspiracy theories that they develop in their mind, and for people to subscribe to them. It's both a mental illness. No.
Did you hear about the one recently?
Which one?
With the girl with the Porsche?
Oh, yes.
What was with
In
the
LA?
Porsche?
Yeah.
What did I miss?
Some astrology influencer, she killed her boyfriend, took her 9-year-old and 8-month-old in the car, dropped or pushed the kids out of the car in the freeway, in the 405 freeway. The really sad part is when she pushed the children, the 9-year-old was holding the 8-month-old, and when she fell, the 8-month-old, like, she let her go because she was injured. The 8-month-old was run over by a car. And then the lady kept driving and crashed her Porsche into a tree and killed herself.
I did not hear about that case.
And the only survivor is a 9-year-old, which she saw when her mother stabbed her boyfriend. And of course, she had to endure the whole baby sister being killed by a car and being thrown from the car. It's just...
That sounds like a case that we're going to end up covering.
Horrible, horrible, horrible. And apparently a couple of days before, she was posting things about the apocalypse and the eclipse and all
yes.
that.
Yes.
Yes, and the end of the world and whatnot.
It is literally a mental illness to subscribe to those things. And so I don't know if Chad Daybell had a mental illness or not, but Lori Vallow 100% had mental illnesses. Matter of fact, she was diagnosed while she was in prison.
Oh, yeah?
If you recall, there was some delay because she was not competent to stand trial for a certain amount of time. And Chad was, he's already writing these kinds of books. So, gosh, a couple days, around the eclipse, huh? Is when all that happened?
Yes, it was a couple of days ago.
Yeah, we're gonna have
the
to...
eclipse was on Monday.
I was in court during the eclipse. I was so mad. But, all right, so Lori marries Tylee's father, Joseph Anthony Ryan, in 2001. In 2006, Lori marries again. So I guess she divorced this guy back in 2005. She gets married to Charles Anthony Vallow, the subject of a different case against her. They married in Las Vegas, making him her fourth husband. Charles worked as a managing partner at RITE Planning Group and PFS Marketing. So July 2014, Lori and Charles, they officially adopted JJ. They had finalized the adoption of, JJ. He was on the spectrum, was the biological grandson of Charles, sister Kay Woodcock, who was married to Larry. Around the end of 2014, Charles and Lori moved to Kauai with Tylee and JJ, and according to business records filed by the Vallows, the family moved with Tylee and JJ to the Hawaiian island of Kauai. Lori was found later vacationing there at the same island with her new husband, Chad, back in 2020. So around 2015, Lori is starting to become obsessed with Daybell's Doomsday books. And there's a picture of one of them. Dominic will flash. The Great Gathering, a novel by Chad Daybell. And if you're listening to the podcast, it's like this little girl appears to be like maybe 4, 5, 6 years old, standing in tall grass, looking at what appears to be a sunset, typical stock photo, religious image. Lori was especially infatuated with the Standing in Holy Places series, which was a fictional series about various exciting prophesized events that still must occur before the second coming. Gosh, when people start talking about that, it's like, I don't know. It's like they could literally say or justify anything that they want because the end is coming. And, they just, on what authority? On the authority of my made up whatever, and so she's getting deeper and deeper into this, and she's already like one of these people that is prone to those kinds of things. Lori's friend told people that she got really obsessed and started buying the books. She must have gotten close to him from the books. It was around December 5th of 2018, which was the first documented connection between Chad and Lori. They first appeared together on a podcast called Time to Warrior Up. And of all the podcasts in all the world, I could think of no podcast that I would least want to listen to other than that. But they did a podcast, and it was with Preparing a People, a doomsday prepper group that Lori's relatives worried was a religious cult. The two appeared with others on several different Preparing a People podcasts, many of which talked about the end of the world. The organization that produced a Preparing a People content has taken down content since, I'd imagine. So in 2019, Charles files for divorce from Lori. And if you recall, Charles, I remember we played clips on our initial coverage of this case about him going to the police, basically saying, Lori is freaking crazy. I'm going to end up dead with this. I just want my kids to be safe. He's like literally pleading with the officer just for some kind of, he doesn't know what to do. He's at what's end. Lori is nuts. I don't know what's wrong with her. She's talking crazy. The kids are telling me stuff. And then, a short time thereafter, he was literally murdered. And as he was going to pick up the children by Alex. And so Charles filed for divorce in 2019. July of that same year, what would that be, 7 months later? Charles is shot and killed by Lori's brother, Alexander Cox. Charles went to Lori's rental home in Chandler, Arizona to pick up JJ during an altercation. Lori's brother, Alex, fatally shot Charles in the chest twice. Lori and Tylee were there. Cox claimed it was self-defense and was never charged by the police, which is bizarre. If you recall that footage, Alex was sitting on the curb, just basically waiting. He said that he had like some kind of a cut on his head or something. What did he do? And there on the body cam, you could see Charles just kind of laying there like he just got pumped with 2 shotgun blast to the chest, fell straight back and was probably dead on the spot. Probably instantaneous, just basically obliterated his heart.
He didn't have any gun or anything on him, so.
Well, Alex said that he charged him with a baseball bat. And he said that Charles was a strong guy, baseball player. He could have caved in my skull. And then he attacked you with a baseball bat. And, they're questioning, but they never charged him with anything. Suspicious all around. So that trial is forthcoming. So we'll see what happens with that. But in August of 2019, that was the last time Larry and Kay Woodcock spoke with JJ. They said they last made contact with JJ in August of 2019 in an interview with KSL TV. The couple said they FaceTimed with their grandson for 35 seconds before the call ended. And if you remember that clip, JJ's kind of like looking off into the distance, like afraid to say anything, or like somebody's distracting him. 35 seconds, then done, then cut off. That was their last communication with them. In about a month later, Lori, Tylee, and JJ, they moved to Rexburg, Idaho. For the beginning of September of 2019, according to Lori's Arizona landlord, he asked the family to vacate the home where the shooting took place, possibly prompting their move to Rexburg. Tylee originally planned to move in with a friend in Arizona, but decided she wanted to remain with her little brother. She was just protective of JJ because that was her little brother. A short time thereafter, JJ's last seen at his new school, Kennedy Elementary in Rexburg. He briefly attended that school, but then Lori unenrolled him. She reportedly told the school's principal that she would be homeschooling him, and the last confirmed sighting of Tylee Ryan is unknown. However, police believe she was last seen around this time as well. And according to the police, Lori and Chad told witnesses that Tylee died in 2017. And Chad told another witness that Lori had no minor children. The couple never reported the children missing. So let's go to October 9th. Tammy calls the police after a masked assailant attempted to shoot her with a paintball gun. Tammy being Chad's wife. She was unloading groceries from her car when a man wearing a ski mask attempted to shoot her with what she thought was a paintball gun at their home in Salem, Idaho. Tammy calls the police. The assailant ran away. Investigators believed it was a prank and never found the man. And we have opined that that was probably Alex, who actually tried to assassinate her, and he missed. But I don't know. Paintball guns and actual guns, shotguns, have a distinctly different sound.
Yes.
But maybe she just, not familiar with the difference. But if you hear something like that and you're not dead and they just run off, like you're not going to, and you don't know the difference, I guess you would rationalize, oh, maybe it was a paintball gun or whatever, a prank. I don't know. But literally 10 days later, Tammy is found dead in her home at the age of 49. The coroner listed her death as natural. In November, almost exactly 2 months, maybe a month and a half later, Chad and Lori are now married. So let's just back up the timeline. All of this happening in 2019. Charles is gone in July. Tammy is gone in October. And in November, they are married. Within a couple of weeks of Tammy's death. Yeah. So November 26th, Rexburg police conduct a well-being check on JJ. Now it's starting to get a little serious. It's like, okay, so after Larry and Kay, they raised concerns that they hadn't seen or heard from JJ in months. The Rexburg Police Department went to Chad and Lori's home to conduct a welfare check. The couple told officers at the time that JJ was staying with relatives in Arizona, which police later discovered was not true. Police went to the couple's home again. The next day, with a search warrant, the couple was already gone. In December, authorities decide to further investigate the death of Tammy. They are now believing it, at that point, to be suspicious, given Chad's disappearance and the mysterious masked assailant. And Tammy's body's exhumed, submitted for autopsy. And then the next day, the very next day, Alex Cox dies in Arizona. Found unresponsive in Gilbert, Arizona. It was later released that his death was caused by blood clots in his lungs. Crazy, crazy. 8 days later, police department officially announced an investigation into the disappearance of Tylee and JJ. A week later, Chad's friend Julie Rowe claims he had prophesized Tammy's death. Julie Rowe, a friend of Chad, attempts to defend her friend as news of the investigation makes headlines. Rowe claimed that Daybell had a vision from angels that Tammy would die years before her death in an interview with Fox 13. In January, the Rexburg police and the FBI searched Chad and Tammy's former home. Police said that more than 43 items were collected from the home, including computers, cell phones, journals, documents, medications. On January 5th, Lori's son, Colby, makes a public plea to his mother. You remember Colby, right?
Yes.
He's the older guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one.
Yeah. He's an interesting young man, that one is.
Mm-hmm.
There was a moment at one of the very first court hearings where Lori was, I don't know if she was being arraigned or not, but it was one of the initial hearings. Chad showed up. So the hearing was sitting. He was not at that point arrested.
Mm-hmm.
But he shows up and he's sitting in the gallery with the audience. And then her son, Colby, is like giving him this death stare, like he wanted to fight him. And then he talks about that in the documentary that came out on Netflix about his opinions of Chad, and obviously that they weren't good. On January 25th, the local authorities locate Chad and Lori in Kauai. Hey, I'm going there pretty soon. My daughter's graduation.
Nice.
So the search continued. All right, so July 25th, they're looking for the kids in Kauai. The couple was staying at a luxury condo at the Kailani of Princeville. Townhomes priced at $61.50 per month. Living large off of the insurance proceeds, I'd imagine. When authorities searched the unit the couple had been staying at since mid-December, they found no evidence that the children were ever there. Lori was court ordered to physically produce the children before a judge in Rexburg by January 30th. And then at this point, they're starting to just become inundated by all the media coverage, and people are like publicly yelling at them, "Where are the kids?" On January 30th, Lori misses the deadline that was pre-marked for her. Fails to comply with the court order. She was given the order on January 26th, was given 5 days. She didn't produce. On February 6th, Arizona police investigate Vallow's connection to her husband Charles' life insurance policy, so they're starting to connect the dots with that. Also that day, surveillance video shows Vallow dumping her children's things into a storage unit. On February 20th, she's finally charged and arrested for deserting and not supporting her children, not yet for murder. She was arrested in Hawaii. She was held on $5 million bail. The Kauai Police Department said, and other charges against her included resisting, obstructing, and all that stuff. On February 24th, there was new footage that pinpointed Tylee was in Yellowstone National Park before her brother disappeared. Tylee's last confirmed sighting had been previously unknown, and although law enforcement officers said she likely disappeared around the same time as her brother in September, JJ was seen 2 weeks after the footage from Yellowstone on September 17th, playing with a neighbor, which was documented by footage from a doorbell camera. So June 10th, the bodies of JJ and Tylee are finally found on the property. During an early court hearing, a state prosecutor said one of the bodies was concealed in a particularly egregious way. And then May 25th comes the indictments. On June 24th of 21, Lori's indicted on the killing of her fourth husband, Charles. On October 21st, Chandler police release a trove of documents showing the couple's bizarre cult-like beliefs. And let's talk about that. So from the Chandler, Arizona Police Department, the documents, which totaled over 1,000 pages, which were obtained by Insider, investigated the July 2019 death of Vallow's ex-husband, Charles. But they also helped piece together Vallow's descent into a fantastical and apocalyptic belief system. The documents showed Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell, and their inner circle believed the world would end in July of 2020. A witness said Daybell even invented a light and dark scale ranging from 0 to 100 to represent a person's trustworthiness. Vallow and Daybell had often referred to ex-husband as Ned and said he had an unclean spirit, but that he was far from the only one. And then her trial commences. All right, so that's pretty much more or less the timeline that the cops are dealing with. So what you have is the timeline is going to be very difficult for the defense to overcome. You have everybody within a short period of time either disappearing or they're missing or they're dead. All of the key players just start falling off one by one. Tammy is gone. Charles is gone. They're within months of each other. Then they go and get married, and then they take the money from the insurance. They go and they're staying in this place that's $6,100 a night or a month, wherever they're staying. This luxury condo. They don't have the kids with them. Clearly, they were hiding something. So let's just breaking it down logically. If you're a juror, in what world, given that they're going to start talking about some of these light scales, this 0 to 100. Okay, so what does it mean if I'm like 80% trustworthy? How do you even come to that conclusion? Oh, well, I could read your aura, or, whatever, he's going to have to say something, but they come up. And it appeared that every time somebody had a negative rating, it was because it was somebody that ran counter to their interest. And so they were in cahoots with this. And the communications between the two of them, it's all going to come out in trial. They were basically joined in philosophies when it came to that, even if they were making it up as they went. Clearly, there was a hierarchy in this cult of two. I don't know, and I don't want to implicate whatever other group they were. I don't know that they were part of a different group. There's no other group that I'm aware of, a religious sect or group that practices these beliefs. And everybody from the Mormon community has vastly distanced themselves from these beliefs. These were unique to them. This was essentially a cult of two individuals. You got Lori, you have Charles. And very often you'll see in their communications, I apologize. Yeah, Chad, Lori and Chad. Very often you'll see in their communications that Lori would look to Chad for insight as to whether or not somebody was good or somebody was bad. As a matter of fact, in some of their communications, it was even like, hey, JJ was behaving, he had a good day today. I don't think he had a demon today, or I don't think he was a zombie today. But then later on, they're conversing back and forth. Oh, they're definitely zombies. And then you have the prosecution basically identifying these strategies as a way of dehumanizing people. And at a certain point, it comes to pass that they've justified so many things between the two of them. They justified why they had to get rid of their collective spouses, because they needed to get together. Why did they feel the need to get rid of the children? What was the deal with that? But they were communicating openly about it, and they condemned the children in very much the same manner as they condemned their spouses, and then it was acted upon. What we've never seen, unless I'm missing something, we've never seen how they collectively died or who was responsible for the death. No. That's the one thing that remains the unknown. But Lori was convicted. I don't imagine that Chad is going to get away with these charges. And again, they're getting him for the conspiracy. They're getting him for the murder charges, which he's responsible for those directly. The big question is, you have those pictures of the children down at the Yellowstone Park. I think Alex was there. Alex isn't there to defend himself. I'm surprised. Well, I'm not surprised, because the defense specifically earmarked Alex as a possible alternative person that could have committed the murders. So it sounds like the defense, although they didn't really come out and say it in their opening statements, but they're trying to pass on the idea that Alex might have been the one to do this at Lori's direction, which to me is his only defense. Because then it becomes like, all right, I know what we all think about Nicole Kessinger, but what if it's like, okay, so I'm the mistress, but I never asked you to kill your kids and your family, right? So if Charles wants to take the position that, look, we were having an affair or whatever. Yes, we got married. Yes, we had plans to do these things, but I didn't ask her to kill her kids. She got these ideas on her own. And yeah, I had these religious conversations about what I thought about rating scales and things of that nature, but I never condemned anybody to death. And her brother would always escalate things whenever he thought that somebody was attacking his sister. He was very overly protective of her. Remember that we talked about on a previous episode that they had like this inappropriate sexual relationship, Lori and his brother and her brother. And so they had this weird relationship where he was very protective. And if he thought that somebody was running counter to her, then he would stick up for her, basically. So essentially, without having any evidence, and maybe this is why he's not coming out and basically stating it, but it appears that they're theory of the case, that their case in chief is going to revolve around stating that
Alex.
we had an affair, we got married, my client was blinded by lust and what he perceived to be was love.
Mm-hmm.
He was this dorky guy that had desired attention for all of his life from his religious books. Lori was his biggest fan,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't able to overcome her charms. She hypnotized him with her sexual prowess. He was not used to somebody being at her level, Miss Texas Lori Vallow, being interested in him. He made the wrong decision, but he didn't have anything to do with the murder of Charles or the kids. And if you think that way, then you're thinking incorrectly. And you're not going to see any evidence to suggest otherwise. That's their case. That's the defense.
Yes.
How do you respond, prosecutor? Maybe that's what I got to do. I always try to give you the defense job. You're like, well, he's guilty.
Yes.
What do you want from me? All right, so that's the defense argument. What say you, prosecutor Ileana?
Well, that strategy just simply doesn't explain a lot of things.
Hey, Dominic, bleep out that F word. Bleep out the F bomb. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ileana.
It doesn't answer a lot of things. Like, there's a lot of things that still need explanation, especially if he wasn't involved in the murders. How did he know, or did he, what's the word? He thought that his wife, Tammy, was going to die, and then she died.
Yeah, well, just because he got lucky with the guess. All right, here's Omar, defense attorney. Just because he was lucky with the guess doesn't mean that he's a murderer. Coincidental? Sure, there's coincidental, but who am I to say that he's not really having these legitimate connections to the divine such that he could make such, maybe he's a prophet. Do you have any evidence that he's not a prophet? Which, of course, is a logical fallacy in itself.
Now,
But, you know.
I know you mentioned that it could have been Alex, but defending his sister, what did Tammy do to, other than being, of course, the wife, why would Alex react to Tammy and murder her to defend the sister, other than being, of course, told that she needed to be murdered by him?
All right, jurors, I want you to hear me out on this one, okay? It's not a stretch to assume that Lori Vallow was threatened by Tammy insofar as that she was the wife and Lori was the mistress. Chad had no inkling that there was ever a beef between the two, although he should have, maybe. But he didn't tell or give the go-ahead for the assassination plot on Tammy. They had nothing to do with him. If Lori wanted him gone and she told her brother that she wanted him gone, her gone, Alex would have done it.
And not him. Okay. Now, what about all the text messages? Like, all the text messages that refer, of course, to the children, like the light and the dark, and coincidentally, their light, I don't know, or their darkness going up, and then they disappear.
Hear me out. You're on. Okay. Jerry, I want you to hear me out. I think we should have done this exercise like to start the show, like the fake little mock trial.
Well, I'm not really doing like the.
I know. I didn't tell you to prep like the prosecution's case.
Like that. I'm just throwing out there.
Yeah, but I think it's instructive. Okay, so I got to convince the jury. You're right about the text message, and she's saying the light and dark and the scale. It's like, jurors, listen. Chad is a dork. He's never had attention from somebody like Lori ever in his life. And now all of a sudden here he is. And the only reason that she's infatuated with him or in love with him is because she believes that he has a connection to the divine. Even if Chad doesn't believe that himself, that's his only saving grace when it comes to her. The cost of him having a girl like that is he has to pretend that he is Prophet Chad Daybell. And he has this divine connection that gives him insight into light and dark, and there's scales and all this stuff, and he's making it up as he goes along, and she's the one that keeps on pressing him, and he has to say something. And so by chance, off the top of his head, through no prompting of his own or no forethought or foresight that this might get out of hand, he concocts this theory, and he's making it up as he goes, and now it just becomes a thing. And because Lori responds positively to it, he just goes with it. But it's not a real thing in actuality. It was just something that he told her because it was scoring him points. But once again, if she perceived his false ratings to be a threat and she told Alex about it, that's the person that's responsible for this. It's not my client. I want my audience to know I don't buy any of this shit. But I got to say anything. I got to say something. And that's what I assume that his defense attorney is going to say.
Yes. Well, maybe it's not a question, but maybe I need to point out that his claim that he didn't know that his words will make Lori Vallow act on the light and the dark and all that. I think that by the first person disappearing and him continuing to do the prophecies and people continue disappearing, like that should have been like a heads up. Like maybe your words have an effect on this person and maybe you're responsible for convincing this person of doing what she's doing.
Jury. Jurors, people of the jury.
I'm like throwing things.
The law with respect to conspiracy to commit murder is that the person had a reasonable belief. And by the way, that's not what the statute said. It's basically you plan something with somebody to kill somebody. Somebody carried out that plan and then blah, right? There's a lot of gray area in between. And here's what the gray area says. It's not reasonable to assume that my client had any inkling that his words that were designed in getting into Lori Vallow's pants were going to result in the death of 2 children. And it's ridiculous to think that. And the prosecution hasn't presented any evidence to suggest that that is true.
Now, tell me about how does he explain the bodies in his house?
I didn't tell her to bury them right there. Hey, I buried raccoons there all the time. And when I saw Alex digging a hole, I assumed he was burying a raccoon. What do you want from me? That's a 4.5 acre lot. I'm not keeping track of every acre at all times. I assumed he was burying a raccoon. I think that was a text message anyway. I'm pretty sure.
Goodness. Now, he met the children and then all of a sudden they're not in their lives. How does he explain that when...
That is a good question. I'm not sure what the explanation for that would be because I don't remember what he told authorities about the children because there's 100% a moment in time where it's unequivocal. It's not deniable that he knew that they were looking for the kids.
Yes.
Because when law enforcement approached them, they were together. They were openly questioning them when they were together. The media was coming in and converging. I have no idea what he specifically told the cops with respect to the children. So whatever statements that he said, and maybe it's going to come out in trial. There's stuff that hasn't been published, but those statements, you're right, could be very damning.
Because then I think back to the Nicole Kessinger and the Scott Peterson. Like if you know your partner is doing weird stuff, like they're looking into her because her children disappeared, and you know something, like you should just spit it out. Like, and I don't know what he told the police about the kids' whereabouts, but
yeah,
I mean, I'm interested to see what he said. Like,
but here's what I think. I don't think he said anything.
That could be.
I think he was a lot smarter than Lori, at least in that regard, in terms of he didn't talk to the cops. He didn't really say anything meaningful that, as far as I'm aware. Lori was all up and down, and I mean, she had other issues. She definitely had a mental illness.
Yes,
100%. It was diagnosed. As far as Chad, I think he was kind of scared to death, and he just kind of clammed up. He's not much of a fighter. He's a flighter, and he lawyered up as soon as he could once he knew that he was going to be the subject of an investigation. Do you remember his voice when he was on the phone with Lori when she called him from? I think she called him from prison, if I recall correctly.
I don't.
Dominic, find a clip of the audio of that and post it here. But it was basically, she was calling him and asking what was going on. He's like, yeah, FBI's here. They're searching for the kids.
Oh, yeah.
And it sure sounded a lot like he was resigned to the fact that they were going to find the children.
Yes, yes.
So,
Thank you for using Telmate.
Hello?
Are you okay?
No, they're searching the property.
The house right now?
Yeah. One of them is. So, Mark means we'll be talking to you.
Okay. What, are they in the house?
No, they're out in the property.
Are they seizing stuff? Again?
They're searching.
my whole theory about it was definitely Alex, and I wasn't paying attention. I mean, that's my BS. I had to make something up on the spot. But he's going to have a tough time when the jury hears that video, that audio, and trying to explain that he had no knowledge. Maybe that's not the argument. Maybe the argument is, maybe he comes out and says that, yeah, I had knowledge of the after the fact, and then I was too scared to say anything because I'm a coward. If I'm guilty of anything, it's just for it's of being that exactly that, a coward. Maybe he falls on that sword.
He can take advantage of his dorky looks and just play that role.
Chad Daybell. Yeah, I don't know if, but you're right. There's a lot of stuff that he
There's
could.
a lot.
Here's the thing with circumstantial cases. This is a circumstantial case.
It is 100%.
The way that you win circumstantial cases is that you attach hooks. Imagine that this ceiling is a guilty verdict. Circumstantial fact number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you keep lining them up and lining them up, and all of these coincidences, and what you're predicting deaths, and then you're giving these rating scales, and then people are disappearing, and then you're taking the insurance money, and then you're going off to Hawaii, and then months later you guys are getting married, and then you're running off and avoiding the authorities because they're looking for the children. At some point, there's too many threads that you can't chop off that lead to the guilty verdict. And there's just too many coincidences. I don't have the delusion. Here's what I know about me. Personally, not being involved in this case, Chad Daybell is effing guilty. He's gonna fry. I believe he's gonna get the death penalty for this one. Because those children did not deserve that. And that little boy and that girl, 17, about on the verge of turning 18 years old. Tammy's gone. Charles is gone. Charles was a good man.
Yes.
He was fighting for his kids. Tammy was a good woman. She had no idea what was coming in. Those kids did not deserve what they got. There was people that loved JJ that would have taken care of him without all of the weird doomsday religious context. And their lives were stolen from them so that they could go spend their lives in Hawaii, living in some luxury condo somewhere, taking these stupid pictures. If I was the prosecution, my exhibit A would be that stupid picture of them on the beach, right next to the bodies of the children, autopsy photos, where they were found, how they were found. What was the cost of this Vegas trip? Exhibit A, pictures of them in Hawaii. Well, the cost was exhibit B, the remains of the children. That's what it was. So he's going to fry.
Yes.
But I'll tell you what, if I was to take on this case, which I would never take on this case, but I'm convinced now, hearing myself, my thought process, you forcing me to go through the exercise, I would probably convince myself that this guy was not guilty. I'm not sure if I would or not, but I would at least consider it. I would go back and forth. I don't know. I don't think I would. No, there's too much. But I would give it a good try. That would be my try.
I'm just curious to see the more details about the evidence, because I remember more about Lori than I remember about him, his involvement.
Yeah.
And we covered this many months ago. So
Well, the Lori thing, yeah, you're right. When we covered it specific to her, and all of the stuff that's come out has been really specific towards her. This is the first time that Chad's actually been in the spotlight. But there's a reason for that, because Chad is not he's introverted. He's not the same as Lori, like this has to be out in public and all this stuff. Whenever you see them together, Lori was the one doing the talking. She was like the leader of that relationship. And in private, he was the leader of her as her spiritual advisor or whatever. And he's not as verbose, but the evidence is pretty, we don't know much of him in that regard as far as the salaciousness of everything. But what we do know, we know quite a bit when it relates to him and his involvement. We have his religious texts. We saw how they were spiraling out of control, where at first they were like this kind of mainstream religious book based in, religious dogma of the time and how it gets progressively more crazy. And then he meets Lori and then it like exponentially gets crazier because he has to tell her something, right? To keep her interested or whatever. At least that's my theory of how it got so out of control. I don't think that he has a mental illness the same way that Lori did.
No, I don't think so.
I think that he was just a dork that was caught up in something that was way over his head. And as a result, he found himself in this jackpot. And now here we are going into day 2 of trial. So I will definitely be sharing some recaps of the trial as some of the more important evidence comes out in the coming episodes. I don't know if we're going to do another deep dive on it. Maybe we will after the trial.
Yeah, maybe
A trial analysis.
after more days have passed from the trial, we have a little bit more information about the evidence that they're going to present.
Yeah, because they're on day 2 and they're not even getting to any of the good. It's basically foundational witnesses at this point. So you're not going to see any of the good stuff maybe probably starting on next week, I'd imagine. But yeah, it is the nature of trial that you got to lay the foundation of things before we get to the good stuff. Otherwise, the good stuff isn't admissible. And so that's where we're at. But yeah, gosh, he's such a dork. We will revisit this once the verdict comes out. There is another case that I think we're going to be covering next week. The Karen Red case. Reed or Red. I don't know how to pronounce it, but
That's one of those words in English that I find interesting because you spell it the same, and depending on what you're doing,
yeah.
it's read or read.
Yeah, we make it up as we go. But I think we're going to do a deep dive into that case. There's a lot of people that have a lot of questions about that case, and there's a lot of craziness going on. We're definitely going to cover that one. I think that's what's up next. Unless you guys want us to do something different. And if that's the case, you can email us at tiltedlawyer@gmail.com. And by the way, if you have any hypotheticals that you want myself and Ileana to analyze on our show, as we do on our Family Law After Dark segment, that would be the place to send them. We tried the Instagram thing. My Instagram got hacked. It no longer exists. My Facebook is gone. I started a new one. I don't even use it anymore. I do have my Instagram. If you're subscribed or follow me on Instagram, I'm definitely going to do something with it. I just haven't yet because of time, trials, last couple of weeks, family vacation, family illnesses. It's been a crazy week. But Ileana, I think we're getting to that time. I think it's time to turn down the lights. It is time for Family Law After Dark, where we give very general legal analysis, but not legal advice, of various inquiries into people's lives revolving around divorce and different things. It's starting to become very popular with some of our subscribers.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
But here we are. Once again, if you guys have something you want us to analyze, send it to tiltedlawyer@gmail.com, and we will, if it's interesting enough, we will talk about it. Let's start here. This guy is a 43-year-old man. He needs advice for his 35-year-old girlfriend, non-mom. All right? So, I have been divorced for 6 years and have a 9-year-old son. I share custody with his mom, 50-50, which means I have my son 3 to 4 days a week. My son has ADHD and not only has trouble focusing his attention and impulse control, but also needs a lot of attention. I've been dating my girlfriend for almost a year and a half. She was raised by a single mom. My girlfriend does not want kids of her own. She has a chronic illness and is generally low energy and a homebody. Her love language is, I don't give a shit about her love language, but it's quality time, I guess. Lastly, she works in retail, random shifts while I work standard business hours, and we live 45 minutes apart. So we can only see each other 1 to 2 days a week, and sometimes it can only be when I have my son. He is talking about his girlfriend, right? This is okay. I introduced my girlfriend to my son about a year ago. Their relationship isn't bad, but it's not great. She's made it clear that she doesn't want to be a mom or his mom. And more recently, she's made it clear that she wants more attention and consideration from me when he's around. Oh, this would be so easy if this was me. I already know what I would tell this lady. It's like, shit.
Oh my God.
Before I say too much, all right. For example, I recently took them both out on the town for a day to a museum and a mall. My son got bored and wanted to leave the museum quickly, which just upset my girlfriend. She wanted to see the art. Then at the mall, my son wanted chicken nuggets while my girlfriend wanted sushi. I found a place that served both, but it was unacceptable to my girlfriend because she didn't think the sushi would be good enough. She wanted good food.
I have to agree.
I got to tell you what though, I've had this I've been this guy.
You've been in that
43.
situation, okay?
I was in this situation at 33.
Okay.
I'll explain after I'm done with this. All right. She wanted whatever. So I found a solution. We ate at a nicer sushi house, and my son got nuggets from the other place to go. But my girlfriend was upset that she had to stand her ground and come across like the bad one. She's made it clear that I need to give her more attention and consideration when I have my son, but it seems like a zero-sum game, and she's made it clear she's unhappy with the way things are now and will leave me if things don't change. But I'm equally fearful that my son needs my attention and consideration as well. I love her and things are great with... What is the legal question, sir?
Yes.
I don't see one. Well, let me just explain
Just
my scenario.
lie.
Okay, so once when I was 33 years old, I was still in law school, and I was seeing a lady that was also in law school, and she wanted to go to a restaurant. I don't remember how she met my daughter, but she did. We were dating seriously enough, I guess, where that was a thing. It happened. She wanted to go to this restaurant. My daughter wanted to go somewhere else, like a Chuck E. Cheese or something. My daughter at the time would have been like 6 or 7. So my daughter won. There was not a discussion about, hey, which one should we go to? She's the winner. She's calling the shots. This is my kid. And she wants to go to Chuck E. Cheese. That's where we're going. And then she was so, well, we could have had at least a discussion about it. There's no discussion. What do you mean? Discussion for what? Well, what about my thoughts? Did you take into consideration what I was feeling?
There's no competition in it.
And I was like, my daughter wins. Her needs come before mine, certainly before yours. And this is my journey. I sacrifice my needs for my daughter all the time. And if you want to stay on the ship, then you have to do your own. And I'm not going to accept all of these whatever arguments about your consider. It was a very easy decision for me. There was not, and very rapidly thereafter, we had broken up, and that was it. That was it. When you're dating and you have a child and you're a single dad, I was kind of basically in this guy's exact same situation. I had like a 50-50 arrangement, which very quickly turned into, well, I'm just a single dad now. Mom had every other weekend. So I had to navigate that. But I was very protective of my daughter and her needs. I made a mistake, which I realized very early on at 33, that I should not have introduced my daughter to her, but I did. But when she made it her needs versus my daughter's needs, that's not even a hesitation. I mean, do you think that what do you want me to say? And, then it was like, what about me? And, she starts talking the same way. And what about, I need quality time. And what about, you need to care about my needs? No, I don't. I don't need to care about a damn thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been in the other position, of course, where I am, of course, the person dating somebody with kids already. And something that I never done, and I think it was pretty clear from the beginning. It's like, I cannot compete with a child. The child
Yeah.
goes before me. Like, I know that's my place. Yes, that does not mean that he's gonna be disrespectful or like dismiss my needs. I just know that if one of the children has needs and I have needs, theirs are gonna come first.
Always.
And there's gonna be a time and place for my needs to be fulfilled.
Yes.
That does not affect the children.
For
So,
sure. If you're doing the single parent thing, it's just if you're doing the parenting thing in general, as you're finding out, your children have a lot of needs. And, when they're babies, they're like this. And they progressively grow smaller, but not really. But they're still, you're protecting them. You're trying to keep them alive. You're trying to turn them into human beings and productive members of society and all of those things. And if you're a single parent, then your main objective is not whoever you're dating. Look, if you're single, then fine, do all of that. You have that privilege of doing that. Once you have a kid, that's all out the window. You're kind of dating as like I don't know if you're dating for purpose or as a hobby or not. I'm just saying it's not the number one overarching need of your life.
Yeah, I must say that, at least from the perspective of somebody that didn't have kids at the time that I started seeing somebody with kids, if you're going to go into that type of relationship, you need to be very clear what is going to be your position, and you need to understand that it's not going to be like any other relationship. Like you're not going to receive that 100% attention all of the time. And if you're not okay with that, then you just need to find somebody that doesn't have kids.
100%.
That's it.
Yep. If that's the kind of attention you need above all else, then I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
And I'll never be your guy because my daughter's already here. And I'm raising her, and that's just how it is.
Yeah.
The reason I married my wife is because she put herself to the side to do whatever I needed to do with my daughter. And it was just always that way.
Yeah.
And she was very thoughtful and very, not calculated, but she was just very understanding of the fact that I have a daughter and she was always going to be secondary to her. And that's why I married her. And now she's at a position of, she's the queen bee in the house.
Exactly.
And she has that status. But at first, she conceded that my children are very important. And by the way, why would you ever date a guy that is willing to sacrifice his child's needs for you?
Yeah, that's another thing when you were reading that. Like the guy's like, because I understand that my kid also needs my time. I'm like, oh, yes, your kid
That's
needs your time.
a pretty fair assumption, dipshit.
Why are you questioning that? Like, are you really thinking about ignoring your kid and going with what she's saying just because she wants attention and you want to save the relationship? No.
Well, this guy's 43, she's 35. I don't know. Maybe there's an attraction mismatch there somehow.
I don't.
Maybe he feels that because he's older and she's perceivably younger. It doesn't even matter. To me, that's just such not a dilemma. I don't know. Well, he doesn't have a legal question. Somebody made a comment the other day on our last episode for Family Law After Dark. It's like, hey, so lawyers are therapists now?
Kind of in family law.
Let me just explain. I didn't ask for this shit. No. This was just, these are the kinds of the way that I talk on these family, correct me if I'm wrong, Elena, the way that I talk about these hypotheticals is the exact same way I talk to my clients when they're sitting across from me on my couch.
Yes.
These are the conversations I have with them all the time. I didn't ask to become a therapist, but it's kind of part of the job. I feel like family law attorneys are uniquely qualified to know what's working, what's not going to work, and what's going to end in disaster and what's not. And I've been doing this for 10 years now, so we've seen a lot. We've seen people's worst. We've seen people at their best. We are ourselves married. Doesn't make us doesn't make us licensed therapists, but we just have a unique perspective. And because I'm forced to do this in my profession, I'm doing it here. Because I find it beneficial for people to gain this perspective that if you don't do certain things and you end up in divorce, this is what you're facing. How do you hold on to a marriage? When is a marriage worth holding on to versus letting go? These are all valid questions because they necessarily implicate different legal situations. It's different separating a 20-year marriage from a 2-year marriage, kids versus no kids, assets versus no assets. It's just, it's what we do. It's the nature of our profession. And so
we can give advice to people not to get married so that they don't end up looking for our services.
Yes.
Like we can tell the red flags, and also if you're already married, we can tell you what to do or not to do to also end up getting divorced. So
You know, I referenced the movie War of the Roses, I think, on the last
Oh, yes.
episode.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching it yesterday with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
It was not her speed. She fell asleep. It was also late. It was also made in 1989, but it's hilarious. I highly recommend it. But Danny DeVito, who was a lawyer in that movie, he said something. He was like, look, buddy, I make $450 an hour. I'm not charging you for this. And when a man that makes $450 an hour tells you he's giving you something for free, you listen. And then he proceeds to give him the story of the roses and what happens. It's just the nature of being a family law attorney. Is what I'll tell you what, I'm a lot less interested in the stories of the therapist of the criminal than I am about the stories about what happened in the attorney room, the criminal defense attorneys, as they were sitting talking to their clients and all the craziness that happened. It's just a lot more comes out. So enough of that diatribe. Let's move on to the next one.
Yes, please.
Okay, so considering divorce, anyone know if it's better to be the initiator, petitioner, or the responder between the two of us? She has threatened divorce on multiple occasions, and I feel like the only reason she hasn't actually done it is the kids. I have always said I don't want a divorce, but I'm seeing the writing on the wall, and it is inevitable now. Will it be better for me if I initiate, or is it okay for me to wait until she initiates? As far as the kids are concerned, I don't want to mess them up with a divorce, but I also feel, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So
California.
what would you answer? What would your answer be to this guy?
Well, in California, being a no-fault state, it doesn't matter who starts
Mm-hmm.
the petition, or if you're being the respondent, you have no advantage by filing first.
And I'm not certain if it really matters if it's California or not. Just you guys are both going to present evidence. Really, where it affects it is, sometimes you get to speak first if you're the petitioner.
Yes.
When you're the petitioner, you don't have a deadline versus if you're the respondent, you got 30 days to respond. It affects things like that. If you guys are both on the fence of whether or not you're going to file a divorce and you've been married for, say, 8 years, and then you wait a couple years and nobody files for divorce, and now you're married for 10 years, you're now, instead of California, in a long-term marriage, such that if alimony is a thing, you no longer have, the court can no longer put an expiration date on the alimony.
Also, if you are separated and you're in need of some alimony, but you let many years pass by before you file and ask for that alimony, you might be denied because
Yes.
you all these years, how do you support yourself? So although it doesn't necessarily have an advantage, if you file first or last, timing when to file might have an effect on the case and, of course, what you want.
I think from my perspective, what I would say is, as the petitioner, you kind of get to take your time and make sure all of your ducks are in a row and you have everything together. Because think what happens with the respondent. You just been served with divorce papers. Holy shit. I got 30 days to respond. Now they're looking for attorneys. Now they're probably on the internet, like reading about a million different things. There's all this anxiety. None of your ducks are in a row. You may or may not respond on time. You may or may not have to deal with a default because you didn't respond on time and you didn't have all the stuff. When you're the petitioner, when it's filed, you're pretty much done until they respond. And so for ease of mind, it's probably easier to be the petitioner. Does it confer any legal advantage? Not really. When everybody's there, they're there. Doesn't matter who speaks first or last. If I speak first, it's one thing. If I speak last, it's another. I'm still getting all my evidence. I don't have their percentages of my wins and losses from when I was petitioner or respondent, but I'd imagine there's not really much of a difference, if anything at all. And so it matters in terms of that. But if you think it's writing on the wall, you might want to consult with an attorney. I don't know how long you've been married because you haven't really said, but you might be up against several deadlines that you're going to want to know about. So look, if it's something you feel the writing's on the wall, then file. I just had this case. I just spoke with somebody else where it was kind of the same scenario. And it was like, oh, I think that she's going to file for a divorce. And in the midst of me giving him a consult, I was telling him that, you know what? all this talk, you guys have been talking about it. At some point, somebody's got to do something.
Yeah.
So why don't you just have the conversation with her? You know, enough talk. If you're going to do it, do it. And then I looked him up. Turns out, oh shit, she already filed. They just haven't served you yet,
Yes,
but
exactly.
it's coming. And so this is information they didn't have before, but you haven't been served with it, but she's already filed and she's got an attorney. And so
Yeah.
where do you go from here? You might want to have a conversation. But yeah, so I don't know what the answer is. If you think there's a hope of reconciliation, you know, that's up to you to decide. But if it's going the way that you think it's going, just it's worth it to talk to a lawyer to figure out your specific circumstances. And if it's going to cover you or protect your rights, for example, you've been married for 9 years and 6 months. If you wait 6 more months, it's a 10-year marriage. It's a long-term marriage. That subjects you to lifetime alimony versus half the term of the marriage. You may just want to file so you can say the date of separation was prior to 10 years to protect yourself that way. That's just one of many examples of why that might be beneficial. But that's we're going to move on from that. Okay, here is an immigration question, sort of. So I'm an American citizen, married to an individual getting his green card via our marriage. He got his work permit about a year ago, and we've been married for about 2 years. Still waiting on the interview for the conditional green card. We married for love, but it may not work out. Was curious if anyone has experience or advice on his eligibility for a green card and citizenship if we were to separate and or divorce. Yeah, I got some experience with that actually.
Favor.
Yeah, generally, if you have, and they've already filed there, he's
already
waiting for
filed,
the
yeah.
interview. Yeah, as long as it was a bona fide marriage, the government understands people get divorced,
Exactly.
people get separated, shit happens. It's not going to affect it as long as they know it was a bona fide marriage. You married for love. They're going to ask them to submit like a picture, social media post. What evidence do you have that this was a legit marriage? Do you guys have joint bank accounts? Do you guys have utilities together, living at the same address? All of those things. But you found out that Billy was cheating with Sally up the hill, and all of a sudden you want to get divorced, and you got this pending immigration application. It's not going to affect anything. He'll be fine. They'll just want to know if it was bona fide or not. What do you think about that, Eliana?
Yeah. The experience that I've had with those cases is that instead of going, I think it's for the citizenship, like instead of, what was it? Like, I know there's a certain time that you have to wait. And then
Yes.
after that, you can apply
For the green card.
green card or citizenship. And
Yeah.
if you're no longer married or you're going through divorce, instead of getting the signature from the other person,
A
you get a
legal
waiver.
permanent resident. So
Yes.
there's a waiting period before you could file the N-400, which allows you to get citizenship.
Yes.
And so there is that waiting period.
Exactly.
But even then, they're going to grant your LPR status as long as it's a bona fide marriage, and then you'll do the waiting period. It's fine.
Exactly.
Just don't do something to get yourself deported as an
Yes, please.
an LPR, which is pretty hard to do. But it happens.
Yes.
But yeah, you'll be fine if you don't commit any more crimes. And
Just make sure that the evidence is submitted, though, because
yeah,
I did have one case where it was in the very initial stages. They had filed, but they had not submitted a bunch of documents. And because they didn't submit anything that they were asking for, it got denied.
did they get like a request for evidence at least?
They did, but it was everything on the other parties, the U.S. citizen's
Oh.
email, and he didn't give access to her. And of course, when she realized it was already denied.
Well, yeah, that sucks. Because then you
it
got to
does.
start all the way over.
Yes.
But even then, she's probably going to be okay. I don't know, actually. If she was never granted LPR status and now the marriage is they're no longer married,
Mm-hmm.
that might be problematic. You're right. Listen to Super Lawyer Ileana. Have all of your paperwork legit. And if you're going to do something like that, make sure that they have both email addresses.
Yes. Access to.
I could see where that would be problematic.
Yes.
All right, so let's move on. All right, this guy needs help getting a divorce. He doesn't have a job. All right, so long story short, I want to see what my options are in getting a divorce. I live in San Jose with no job. I'm wondering if my case is eligible for an attorney to take on for free. There's no eligibility, buddy. If a guy wants to take it on for free, they could do it. But good luck finding somebody that will do that. He says, emotionally and mentally abusive. I had to abandon my job right after marriage. Don't have any kids, thank God. He has a history of cocaine use and recently found out he's been seeing escorts. I have screenshots. Nobody gives a shit. He works as a car salesman and makes good enough to support us during the marriage, but did not allow me to seek employment. How long were they married for? One of my friends told me to just ignore it, and when I plan to remarry, I can deal with the divorce then. That's the stupidest thing you could do. Don't listen to your friend.
Please.
You're not telling me how long you have been married for. Did I miss it? Am I just missing it?
I don't think you mentioned, yeah.
Okay, so he's emotionally and mentally abusive. Then get out of the marriage. Well, here's the thing. You don't have to have a lawyer to file a divorce. You don't have any kids. I don't know if you have any significant assets. Whether or not you need an attorney really depends on this. If there's no assets and there's no kids, you just want to get the divorce. That's a very simple issue. You're going to file a document if you live in the state of California, which you said you do in San Jose. You're going to list your assets and you're going to basically, we don't have anything. And there's on the judgment form, you're going to say this is a no asset marriage and we have no kids. And then it's going to ask you questions. Have irreconcilable differences arisen in your marriage such that no amount of therapy or counseling would help or rectify the situation? You're going to say yes. Do you wish to be restored to the status of a single person? Yes. And then, you're divorced. If you don't do this, if you wait until whenever, I don't know who it's going to affect more. I mean, it seems like he's working, you're not.
Yeah. Probably him.
But if you wait, 5, 10, 12, 15 years, just keep this in mind. You might think that you're living this single life. And I'm not saying that this can't be fixed in court because it can. Date of separation is going to be whenever you guys stop living as man and wife, regardless of when you file for divorce. And I know I'm kind of corroborating what your friend is telling you. I'm just telling you it's stupid to do that. But listen, let's just say that you wait 15 years from now, and in the midst of all of that, you did start deciding to work and pursue a career, and you got yourself an undergraduate degree, and then you got a job as a filmmaker, and now you're making like $800,000 a year. He is going to file in his response when you inevitably ask for divorce. He's going to want alimony. He's going to want half of your house. He's going to want half of your cars. He's going to want half of all your stuff. And because you are married, still technically under the law, it's technically, presumptively community property. I'm not saying you can't fix that because of course you can, but you're going to need an attorney, and then you're going to you're probably going to end up paying somewhere upwards of $30,000 to $50,000 to fix all of that and stuff in court because that guy ain't got nothing to lose. And in that scenario, he's looking for alimony from you and for half of the equity in your house, which at that point will probably be somewhere close to $750,000, in which case your friend's advice, if it's not fixed, will have cost you in excess of probably $500,000. I don't recommend doing it that way. Just get it divorced now. You can do it yourself for probably less than not even the filing fee because you don't make any money. You'll probably qualify for the fee waiver. You don't even have to pay the $515 filing fee or whatever it is. But that's my advice to her. What do you say to that?
Same thing I just told client yesterday. The worst cases to deal with, well, not the worst, but one of the worst is when they separate, but they file like 10 or 15 years after
that
they
sucks.
separated. And the amount of evidence and all the things, discovery that we need to do, it's so annoying.
Yes.
And it could have been avoided if they had filed right after separation or closer. I mean, maybe like a year after separation.
You want to know what an attorney's least favorite thing to do in all the world? It's discovery.
Yes.
And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of things that attorneys bill for. Some attorneys bill for every little thing, every little email, every little phone call. I personally don't do that. But if you make me do discovery, I'm billing you for that shit. And I bill at $450 an hour. And it's going to be expensive because discovery takes many, many hours going through the discovery. And now, okay, I've asked for 35 special interrogatories. They just sent me a stack of documents, 5,000 pages deep. You know what I now have to do? Go through every single page one by one to make sure we're not missing anything. That is how litigation becomes really costly.
Mm-hmm.
And what's more, you're asking for all this stuff. They're going to ask you for the same thing.
Yes.
You're going to have to produce an equally large stack of papers to give to them. And then we're going to go to trial over all of it, probably a 3-day trial with that much evidence for something that could have been resolved in 5 minutes had you just gotten it done now.
And what I see a lot in these cases is that they want to prove something, I don't know, maybe a credit or something like that is on bank statements.
Yeah.
And banks only keep records up to 7 years.
7 years, I think, is the, yeah.
And a lot of times it has been more than 7 years, and now there's no record, and now we can't prove your point that you paid the down payment from your separate property, and you're screwed only because you didn't file.
That's it. You could have. You could. Do you see our point? You see how dumb your friend's advice is. I just hope you know that. I really hope you just file and get the effing thing done. Just get it done. You're clearly out. You have no kids. You have no baggage.
Worst case scenario, you make up again and you remarry. That.
Don't do that. Just.
It happens.
I know it happens, but Jesus. I mean, it seems like she's young. Just get on with life.
Yes.
He's a freaking car salesman, for Christ's sakes. Nothing against car salesmen, but that's usually a job that you have in your 20s. It's not really a career. I don't know. Hey, Dominic, you want to be a car salesman?
I actually was for a little bit.
There you go. Oh, my.
Oh, boy. I'd love for Dominic to sell me a car. You know, I just bought my truck in July. And then the car salesman, he kept on saying this line. He was like, hey, you could have your car for, I don't know, whatever he's saying, $50,000 right now. It's brand new. You just gas and go. It's like, what do you keep saying gas and go for? It's like, oh, you just put the gas in, and then you could leave and drive off the lot. It's like, I could do that with my car right now. Like, how is that a big selling point? Like, what are we doing?
And what is the alternative? Like, you have to wait another day to get gas on it?
It's funny. Like when I go and negotiate for a car, like people get like super, oh, the big lawyer here. And so we have to be extra on our game. But like, if you know that, then why would you use a line like that? Just you gas and go and we're, live. Come on, man. Is that like your big line for like
I do expect the car to drive out of the lot.
For what it's worth, I just want to say this. I want to make this point clear. I had already purchased a car. Mm-hmm. I bought a used car. It was like a 2022 Ford truck, F-150, whatever. I got it for like a good deal. I was already pre-approved for it and everything. I was going to buy it. And then my wife was like, why don't you just go and see what you could do with the lot down the street? Mm-hmm. So I went and I literally said, look, I don't need anything. Mm-hmm. I've already bought a car. I literally bought it online. And so this is what I'm buying this for. And so I'm only leaving here with the car today. If you can make me a deal, I can't refuse. Mm-hmm. And then they were saying all of this stuff that, well, we can knock off this, and that. And that's all we could do. It's like, no, because actually I don't have to pay for the premium bullshit here. Mm-hmm. And then whatever this bullshit charges. Look, I got to pay for the taxes. I got to pay for the registration fee, licensing fee, whatever's. All the other stuff is negotiable. I'm not paying for any of that. Mm-hmm. So unless you take it off, I'm not doing it. And then he's giving me the gas and go line. Long story short, I bought the car. I regretted it because I could have bought the same car. My wife talked me into it. See, this is why men don't need women. We don't need women, but we do. But if it had just been me, I would have left and had an extra $12,000 in my pocket at the end of the day.
I guess it also depends on the type of person when they go into a dealership. Because
I mean, I don't pretend to be like the master negotiator for cars. Mm-hmm. I just know what I didn't have to pay and what I did have to pay. It seems like I still got hosed on the warranty they try to sell me.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot what it was, but it was like, okay, what if I gave you a 7-year warranty as opposed to a 3? He's like, oh, well, that'd be, it's like, done. And then he looked at it, and then I looked at it after the fact. I was like, holy shit, it's like a This doesn't even cover oil changes. Like what you said.
No.
I hate you guys.
No, I'm the type of person that will probably buy a car online. Last car that I bought, I just sent my husband to the dealership and I told him, these are the cars that I like. Look at them. You know what I like? Tell me which are the top 3. And then after he told me what were the top 3, he did his research. I searched online like for safety and all that. And I told him between these 2, take me to the dealership. Saw one of them. I was like, no. Saw the other one. Yes, I'll take it like right now. And that's it. Like,
That's fine. That's perfect.
I don't need to convince him. But my husband, last 3 cars that he has bought, he has gone to the dealership to look. And somehow hours later, I'm like, why haven't you come back? And he comes back driving a new car.
Exactly.
And I'm like, how?
Nobody
did this
goes to a
happen?
dealership to look.
Well, I can go and look.
No, it's not a mall. You don't just go like you're shopping for a sweater.
I did, and I didn't like what I saw, and I just left. Like,
When a man goes to the store,
well, yeah, that's true.
it's to buy something. I'm not going there to
That's
shop
true.
around, you know? I already know what I want.
I guess I didn't.
You know,
think about
I told my wife, I'm buying her a car.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you just pick something you want. I will have no input as to what it is. It's not for me, it's for you. And she wanted a Tesla.
Oh,
And so she's like all on this like electronic cars kick and everything. But I was like, okay, like the charging and everything and whatever, you could just go and you don't have to pay for gas. It's like, yeah, but I'm buying a brand new car. I'm still paying for the car. And plus it gets like, they say that you're supposed to get like 350 miles per charge or something like that. I don't know. But in actuality, from everybody I've ever spoken to, it's like, no, that's bullshit. It's more like 150 miles,
less.
depending on how you drive. And then you have to find a charging station and all this. Like, you know what? I'd just rather put gas in my car because I know how fast I'm going to go and there's gas stations everywhere.
I don't know.
But she wants the Tesla. And so
I hate the gas stations. I don't think I'm gonna like also the idea of having to plug in a car for electricity.
what if you do it at your house?
Yeah, but then if you're driving a long drive and then you have to stop and find somewhere to charge.
Exactly. Which was my
that's
point.
The part, but the same thing with gas. Like I just don't like that part of having to, I guess, give maintenance to the car to keep it running.
I don't know, man. I know how to fill my gas tank, and it's just part of life.
I know how to fill it. It's one of the most annoying things that I have to do every single day.
I can't imagine not having to fill my gas tank. It's just, you know.
Well, I guess I'm one of those.
I really want
people-
Dominic to sell me a car. I'm curious about how he would negotiate with me. I'm wanting to see if he would give me like a gas and go line or
Gas
something.
and go.
Like what would be your big line, Dominic?
I would just tell them I'll take off the packages because our dealership also had packages that were pointless, dumb packages, and I was like, I'll get rid of the packages completely for you right now if you do the deal. And that's how I got most of my customers.
I would say I am not doing the deal unless I'm only paying for the registration and the tax. If I'm paying for anything else, kiss my ass. I have a car. I don't need this shit.
What's a good strategy that helped me last time I bought a car? Go 30 minutes before they're closing because they want to get out of there and they'll just go ahead and say, you know what? I'm not going to even offer you this. I'm going to show it to you. If it's optional, this is what you can, it's not optional. And then that's it.
That is true.
And we closed the deal like super quick and it was out of there. I was the last one, of course. They were like,
yeah, that's actually really good advice, you know. But yeah, the whole car, we were so far off track. We were not doing family.
I know.
Talk right. We're doing car sales with Dominic. Negotiation skills with Dominic, the producer. All right, let's move on to another case. The whiskey's starting to kick in a little bit. I'm the only one drinking because it's like 3:13. I know. We got another 13 minutes to go. And then we'll wrap this up. Okay, so what would be? This is a good question. Well, it looks like a good question. Mm-hmm. What would be your love? What am I reading? What would be your lessons learned, advice to others who have never divorced? I feel like I'm the only person that's been divorced in this room. I feel like this is a question to me.
Okay.
So I'm going to answer it. Well, I'll let you guys chime in. You guys could chime in. Dominic could jump in with all of his knowledge. for those of you who have been divorced at least once, if you can make a list of lessons learned and advice to others who have never divorced, or maybe if you were able to send them back to your past pre-married self, what would they be? And with that said, this list should not attack the other. Oh, get out of here. Should ideally also include things you could have done differently to help or better the relationship, because although the divorce could have been one person's fault that caused the final collapse, both sides most likely have things they each could have done better. All right. I'm curious what you would tell this guy, Eliana. What would you say to him?
I have no idea. I mean, it's just such an open question. Like, and I've never been divorced, so
Dominic is not old enough to answer this question, I feel like. So here's my perspective. When I got divorced, I was 29 years old. And the reasons why I got married, I guess, would be the lessons learned. The reason why I got married, I was like 22. I was young, really stupid. And if you see pictures of me at 22 years old, I was just really boyishly looking. I looked really young, you know, had no business getting married. But the reasons why I got married initially had nothing to do with my feelings towards my partner at the time. It had everything to do with things that I was trying to fix in my family line, failed marriages. I was the product of a broken home and all those kinds of things. So when I got married, it was very much the main focus of it was trying to correct the evils of my father for whatever he was guilty of. I mean, he was a kid when he got married to my mom. He was like 19 years old. He was a dumbass, teenager, child. But, you know, he's over here trying to play, you know, big boy games. Mm-hmm. So when I got married, it was very much the same thing. I had no business being who I was at 22 versus who I am at 43 are not even the same species of animal. Completely different. Mm-hmm. Dominic's 25 years old. When I was 25, I was still curious about the world. I was still of the mindset that, with just a little elbow grease, I could affect change in all of the world. And I could get into the legal world and through my lawyering prowess, I could really affect change. You were not affecting jack with your lawyering prowess. That is not how change is done. But, you know, we have these ideas of grandeur when we're younger. And when you are getting married and you have ideas of grandeur, imagine what her ideas of grandeur are. She has similar ideas, but they're very different from yours. And they're not going to match because your prefrontal cortex is not even fully developed. Dominic, I know you're 25 years old, you're a good guy and all, but you're still a science experiment when it comes to the world. You're not even, I don't know who you're going to be at 30 years old. At 25, you know, you're this guy, you're watching your figure carefully and you're doing the keto thing. You're about to take this trip to Japan and it's all well and good. And thank God you have no designs, as far as I know, on getting married to anybody. That's perfect. That's great. That's good. That's good stuff. You do not marry for happiness. And Eliana, maybe you could expound on this on this idea, because here's my idea of what I've learned 2 marriages in. God willing, only 2 marriages, you know. My idea of marriage is you don't marry for happiness. That's impossible. It's extremely unfair to ask your partner to keep you happy all of the time. The reasons that we marry are for legacy. But you can't buy legacy. You can't marry into legacy. Legacy is created through the perils that you go through and overcome. And so when you marry and you're married to your partner, you're going to find out very quickly what is the worst of them. You're going to find out all of their snakes, all of their demons, and you're going to find out who they are, the most rotten, at their most rotten of states. That's what you're going to be confronted with. The more intimate you are with them as a person, the worse they're going to look to you. And it's incumbent on you for the sake of legacy, for the sake of marriage, to accept it and find a way to live with it. And if you're not willing to go to those depths with an individual, then you shouldn't be getting married. And a lot of people get married unaware of, oh, that's what it was supposed to be. Oh, what's his name? He speaks all the time about music and what is the point of music. And a lot of it relates to marriage, and a lot of it relates to life experience. Alan Watts, he says that the point of music, it's not to get to the end. So you listen to a song and, much like life, we're always so racing to the end conclusion. The point of marriage is not to, oh, you have this 50-year marriage, It's all of the in-between, and then it relates it to a song. It's like you don't listen to the music just to hear the last note. You got to listen to the first verse and then the chorus and then the second verse and then the chorus and then the third verse, and it all relates to each other in such a way. And there's highs and lows in the music, and you dance to the music, and that's the point. If it wasn't the point to listen to the entire song, then there'd be no point in playing the entire song. You just sit there in the concert and wait for the one big last crashing crescendo. So you don't get to the 50-year anniversary just because that's what you desire in life. It creates a great deal of a sacrifice on your part, sacrifice of your happiness, sacrifice of your comforts, sacrifice of your desires, and commitment to the legacy that you build. That's how deep it goes. And if you think that I'm speaking dramatically, I am, because that's what it is, because that's what it means. And I've seen my wife, I've seen her at her worst. I've seen her in her sickness, and it really is in sickness and health. She's not going to be the hot 29-year-old Latina for all of her life. At some point, she's going to get older. At some point, she's going to get sick. She's going to bury your children. She's going to help you raise your kids. She's going to cook you some really bad meals, and sometimes they'll be really good. And it's a given, sometimes it's just a mystery meal. We don't know what we're eating tonight. Sometimes it's a Caesar salad with grilled shrimp, and it's like weird, but you consume it out of love because it's what we do. It's what you marry for. And so you're marrying somebody because you understand that, look, you can fall in love with anybody. You really can. You often run into times when you're married where you're completely silent with your spouse because you have nothing left to talk about because you know everything about each other. There's this great line in Pulp Fiction that I know Dominic, and I know you guys have never seen this movie, but there's this great line that, what's her name, says to John Travolta as they're sitting at the restaurant, where it's like, people just don't know how to shut the F up together. Everybody thinks they got to fill silence with some stupid noise. But you're really in love with somebody. You sit there and enjoy a moment of silence with them. And then people become disenchanted with, oh, I'm so bored with my spouse. And then you find some coworker to talk to or some whatever to talk to. And all of a sudden they're brand new and exciting and you have everything to talk about. And you think, oh, well, maybe this person is better than my spouse because they engage me so well and we talk so well. Hey, you spend a year with that person, you ain't going to have nothing to talk about with them either. They're going to become just as boring as your partner is now. It's the novelty that you're attracted to. It's not the person. And until you know how to dismiss novelty for the sake of legacy, you have no business getting married. And just understand what you're doing when you decide to take this step, because it's all or nothing. And if you're not prepared to accept a person at their absolute worst, to accept all of their snakes and all of their demons and still love them and give to them when they can't give to you in the hopes that they might do the same for you, you have no business marrying that person. If you get married too young and you realize you got married for the wrong reasons because everything that I have just explained was not contemplated by you or by anybody around you who was counseling you at the time that you decided to get married, there was nothing wrong with pulling the plug on it and saying, you know what? I effed this up. It's a long life. I'm going to cut ties now because life isn't worth living in this kind of a marriage. When you have two people that are not willing to accept your worst, that are not willing to sacrifice for you, that are not willing to lift you up, that are not willing to do the things that you require to live your life, then get rid of them. I'll tell you what, when I got my first divorce, the first time that I knew that I was definitely getting divorced was, I remember I told her that I was going to law school. And it was so much like that movie, Pursuit of Happiness. You remember that movie? You saw that movie. You saw the movie, Dominic. Yeah. At the very beginning of that movie, he's telling his life about how he got this internship with J.P. Morgan. And, you know, it was, nothing was guaranteed and it was for no money at all, but he was going to give it his best shot because that's what life requires of him. And then she's like, well, why don't you just be an astronaut? And then she just kind of scoffs at him and then she just leaves. She left. And then he fulfilled all of his dreams without her, which was a beautiful moment for him. It was so similar to my story. My wife basically said, the first one, law school for what? You really? Seriously, you're going to be a lawyer? That's what we're going to do? You know, you're going to law school all of a sudden, you know? It was almost it was just so parallel to that movie. And then that's when we got separated and then ultimately divorced. And then I was in law school at the time. And then, you know, we've lived our different lives and I've lived happily ever after. And that is what it is. But if I were to have stayed in that marriage, it would have not benefited my life. It would have sucked life out of me. So if you've found yourself in a bad marriage in your 20s or your 30s or whatever, it gets a little dicey going into your 40s and 50s. But if you're in that position, then leave. Because it's not going to get any better. No. Because a marriage that was not built on a foundation of what I described a commitment should be is not really a marriage worth living. And if you come to that realization, there's nothing wrong with cutting the cord, and I will cut myself off with that. What do you think about all that, Ileana? What do you think, Dominic?
Yeah, could you say?
Do you concur?
Yes. I mean, I agree. I just will add that, especially when people are young, the decision to get married should come from you. Like, you need to completely ignore everybody around you, society, family, what they expect from you. And also think about the reasons why you're getting married. Because what I've seen a lot is people trying to fix their relationships or issues with getting married, with or having a child, because they think that this new novelty, this new celebration is gonna help fix everything, but no, it's just gonna make it worse.
Yeah, it's not like a puppy.
No. So it just, aside from, of course, my job, unfortunately, I've seen it happen among friends a lot where they just get married for the wrong reasons. And from the beginning, I'm like, yep, this is not going to work. And exactly months or even years later, a divorce is coming. So,
yeah. First of all, if you're ever unsafe in a marriage, get the hell out.
Oh, yes. Safety
is number one. There was a hypothetical that we addressed last week where it was like, hey, you know, I married this guy and there's nothing wrong with him. There's nothing wrong. I'm just bored is basically what she was saying. Should I get a divorce? My advice was just give it a year. We talked about like therapy and stuff. But yeah, if your expectation is perennial happiness and you're always entertained and you always find him funny and he's not going to annoy you to no end or whatever, and everything's going to be this big fairy tale, you are not mature enough to get married. And matter of fact, you should probably just not be married now. But my advice to her was to wait a year, therapy, whatever we said. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. Marriage is not a cure.
No.
It is not a cure. It is a destination, and it requires an enormous amount of commitment. More than you've ever imagined. It's more than a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It's something different. That's my advice to this person. My lessons learned, those are my lessons. Let's move on. We got one more and then we're done.
Okay.
All right. So this is a short one. She says, divorce advice with a narcissist. I love that word.
The narcissist.
Don't you love that word?
Whenever I start a consultation and they tell me, oh, just a heads up, my ex is a narcissist.
Exactly.
I'm like, oh, God, here we go.
Say totally a narcissist.
All of
Totally.
the exes are narcissists when it comes to consultations. So.
Yep. Yep. All of them. Well, here we go. What do we got? We have, so I'm soon to be divorcing my narcissistic husband. He and his aunt conspired to take my children away from me. My husband is abusive mentally, emotionally, physically. He also has multiple online emotional affairs and was never caught in a physical affair, but the signs were there. I need help in just getting sorted with what to expect and how to prepare myself. I'm still reeling from the pain of losing everything we built alongside, recovering from the bruises he left. Life really sucks right now. I've got a feeling there's a lot more to this story. Of course there is. What would you tell this young lady?
Get some mental help. I mean, not mental in terms like she's sick, but some mental health support, because she seems to be not dealing well with this process. I don't know. There's not much legally other than get a divorce.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, mentally, emotionally, physically abused. Get your ass out of that marriage immediately. Second of all, you know, I mean, she's talking about the online affair, so she's out on the marriage. I get that impression. What to expect, how to prepare myself. She hasn't really left a whole lot of information.
No.
She's recovering from bruises that he left. Life really sucks.
Get a restraining order if it was.
Oh, I mean, if she's in danger, for sure. He and his aunt conspired to take my children away from me. All right, well, let's deal with that one really quick. If you have bruises on your arm, if you have evidence of physical abuse on his part, by all means get a restraining order, because for no other reason than to keep you safe. But secondarily to that is Family Code Section 3044. There's a presumption that he can't have custody of the children if he has committed acts of domestic violence against you specifically. And so he may try to threaten you with the children or take the children away, but he's not going to be able to do it because of the way the law is constructed in the state of California. With that said, I don't know where you're at right now. I don't know where you're going to go with the children, but you have to get yourself out of there for the sake of the safety of the children and for the sake of the safety of yourself. You have to have somewhere to go. You cannot, by any measure, leave the children with him. So if that means you got to go to a cousin's house, you got to go to a sister's house, you got to go to some friend's house and take the children with you, and you're doing it in the name of safety, then you got to file what's called an ex parte request for a domestic violence restraining order. You don't have to really prove anything. You got to just tell the judge exactly what's happened to you. How did you get those bruises on your arm? What's the last instance of abuse that you experienced? How long has this been going on? Why do you think you're in danger? Why are the children in danger? Get yourself a restraining order. And even if they don't grant a restraining order for the children, if they grant the restraining order for you and the children are around you, they will be protected. And then they will, by virtue of that restraining order, make a temporary order that he should have no visitation until further order of the court. And then they're going to explore the veracity of your claims. And then inevitably they will make permanent orders. But if they find that he's been abusing you under the DVPA, the 6200 series of the California Family Code, which gives this very broad definition of what domestic violence is. It could be anything from physical abuse to sending mean text messages. They kind of summarize it by anything that disturbs your peace, which is very broad, of course. But all you got to do is prove that that's going on and that you're legitimately in danger or fear of him. And you will have an order that says that you have full custody, no visitation to dad until we figure out what's going on with him. And obviously that's going to lead to a domestic violence hearing. You're going to have to probably get yourself an attorney for it, unless you feel confident enough to tell your story by yourself in front of the judge. The danger in not having an attorney is if he gets an attorney and you're trying to put on evidence of domestic violence and you don't know how to get it in because you don't know the full evidence code, you're going to have a bad day in court. Maybe. It's possible you could win on your own, but it's not guaranteed. At that point, if they make a finding that domestic violence has occurred, he's not going to have any visitation. And any visitation he has is likely going to be supervised, probably by a professional monitor, unless you guys could agree on some non-professional monitor that doesn't cost any money, and good luck with that. But you have to get these things done, and you got to get it done now. And I know that you say life really sucks right now, and it does. But if you don't take these steps and you wait on this and you don't file for a restraining order, let's say you wait a year and then he doesn't leave marks on you again, good luck proving your case, because then it's going to be like, okay, if you knew this was an issue, why didn't you do it like a year ago?
Exactly.
And then your claims are going to have less weight. So if this just happened, you still got bruises on your arm, you got to go now. You have to go now. Do not wait. Don't let him talk you out of it because of whatever threats he's making. You got to do it right now. What do you think, Ileana?
No, I agree. Unfortunately, it happens a lot where people go through these domestic violence incidents and they don't do anything in the moment, and then later on they're going through a divorce or some custody battle and they want to bring up the domestic violence incident, and usually there's the argument, well, why didn't you do anything at that point?
Yeah.
I guess it wasn't, like you said, it's less weight.
And I really hate when judges ask that question or counsel makes that argument. It's just, there's a million reasons why
There
not.
are, yes. But at the same time,
You still got to prove your case.
you still got to prove your case. And there's always that, not option, but I mean, it could happen that it wasn't as bad as you're telling it now. And
True.
it can be used against you.
Yes.
Much, so
100%.
just,
So that is our advice for her. I hope that she gets her help. I hope that she takes action now. It'd be really stupid of her to wait. I guess we'll see.
with divorce, like just having issues, I can see why you would just give another chance to the other person, even
Yeah.
infidelity. But with domestic violence, the first time, just leave. Like, at least to me as a woman, I wouldn't tolerate.
But it's also the logical fallacy in that argument about why didn't you bring this up 8 months ago? Because we were effing married with kids, and it's not just like, I'm breaking up with my boyfriend. He's like the main source of financial support. We have a house together. We got kids together. It's not just, he sent me a mean text message. I'm going to definitely go get a restraining order. There's a lot of thoughts and consideration that goes into it. But that's usually the main, well, why didn't you bring this up whenever? Which is why it's so important, even though you're unsure, even though you don't want to. You could always dismiss a claim that you bring, especially if they haven't filed a response. You could resolve it later. But if you don't, if you wait, then they're going to have that argument. As illogical as it is, it's still basically his main point.
Yes.
If I was so dangerous, then why didn't she move out a long time ago? Because I was a stay-at-home mom, because I have nowhere to go, because I had no other source of financial stability, because the children didn't know about any of these things that were going on, because it would mean that they're going to have a broken home, and because I was a product of a broken home, and because I psychologically don't want to go there with myself, and now I'm having to come to the realization that all of these things are happening, and all these things are going off in my brain at the same time. Forgive me if I didn't know to make the decision about when to file a domestic violence restraining order. Because abuse has just become a way of life for me, and I didn't know that I had to definitely, every single time it happened, rush to the court to tell the judge about it.
No, that's definitely, you're describing the battered woman syndrome.
That's what it is. I've had lots of those cases.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so hard because I guess it depends a lot on personality and what you've been through. I personally, I guess, can tell the red flags and have never allowed like people like that into my life, but I can see how other people will allow it and will stay in there. That's why I guess at least for me, first time that it happens, especially if it is physical, to me, it's like, okay, I'm done.
Automatic.
But
yeah.
I can tell how other people will stay. Like you're explaining, there's so many reasons why you will stay. But if you're asking for advice, I'm telling you, the first time it happens, if you can't leave.
Could you imagine? Okay, let's say that you could notice all the red flags. What if the red flags didn't manifest until 8 years later?
And it happens.
After you've been married for 4 years and have a kid or 2. Then what?
No, then, I mean, same. I mean,
because you're saying that right now. You're saying, oh, the
Yes.
first time it happens, I'm definitely gone. It's like, but now it's just like, what the F?
no, of course, it will be like a what the F, but I don't know. I think I'm not the right person to ask because of what I do, of course.
Yeah.
Because if my husband would put a hand on me, like, I just, even if I have a daughter, to me, it's no question. Like, I need to leave. But
Yeah.
I can see how, and it also depends a lot on what environment you grew up.
Mm-hmm.
If you saw this around you, if you thought it was normal, if people around you are telling you, yeah, that happens in marriage, like there's just so many
Yeah.
factors that affect this decision. But again, if you're asking for advice, just, if you can, just leave.
I feel like if my wife put her hands on me, I wouldn't think that she was serious. I wouldn't think it was like, oh, are we play fighting now, or what are we what are we doing? But I feel
Yeah.
like if I were to put my hands on her, then I don't think that she would have any hesitation
Yes.
getting out, as she
Mhm.
should. Because I've never done that before. But she's told me about like experience she's had with like exes about things that they would say and like try to manipulate. It's like, really?
Yes.
And like, I'm just not that guy to have to say those things to somebody, you know?
And like the little things, like for example, I remember there was one guy that I dated that made a comment about my skirt being too short. I was like, yeah, you're not going to be commenting about how I dress.
Yeah.
There was another one in high school that I remember I told him of my desire to eventually, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And at that moment, there was no school in Puerto Rico for veterinarians. So I knew I was going to need to go overseas to the States. And as soon as I told him that, he's like, oh, if you're with me, you're not going to study in like overseas or anything like that. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's why I'm not going to be with you. Like, that's the whole reason. Like little things like that you could tell that eventually, if you continue with that person, it's going to be controlling.
Yeah.
And and those are like little things, not even physical. Physical, fortunately, I haven't had that experience,
Yeah.
but I have had friends around me, and I don't know. I've seen it go both ways. I've seen people just be like, okay, no, I'm not gonna deal with this. And I've seen people just stay there
Yeah.
thinking they're gonna change, thinking that maybe they were a little bit intoxicated and they didn't know what they were doing and they put
Yeah.
excuses, but I don't know.
I gotta tell you, I've been intoxicated many times. I never had the inkling to put my hands on a woman.
Exactly. That's what I think. Like if it happens once, it's probably gonna happen again and he's gonna get intoxicated again. And no, like it's, I don't know.
Yeah, huge red flag. That's not an excuse. You know, oh, I don't know. I was so mad in the moment. I was having such a bad day.
No.
There's plenty of men out there that have lots of bad days that don't decide to hit women
Yes.
or feel the need to degrade them verbally, physically, whatever. So that's all we have for you guys on this episode of Family Law After Dark. If you have stayed with us for this entire 2.5 hour long form podcast, thank you so much. Oh, you're going to want to stay tuned for the, fulfillment of our contract.
Oh my.
I want you to, for the next minute and a half or so, to be serenaded by the soothing sounds of Ileana clone Rosa as she sings whatever she's going to sing. It's going to happen. You got to get him your audio clip tonight. I'm going to get him my audio clip.
I gotta put on my daughter's music, I guess. I don't know. The thing is that I find myself singing in the house the songs that, like not lullabies, but like the kids.
It's the kids' songs. I know how it goes,
Yes.
man. I got the same songs running through my house.
But if you tell me like to sing it, it's like, oh, I It's not the same.
I am not looking forward to it any more than you are, but here we are. Well, guys, stick around for that because it is coming. The big payoff for the 10,000 subscriber promise that we made like a month ago.
Yes.
But for everybody else that you don't want to hear that, you don't need to hear what you're about to hear. You could just sign off right now. I could tell you, I could promise you, I'm sending this clip to Dominic. I'm never going to listen to it. He's going to do whatever he does with it, and I'm just going to be done.
Oh.
I'm already cringing at the thought of what's coming. But here it is. I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.